Thank you for ano ha, for ano ba yun? Okay, thank you. Excuse ha, okay, medyo may ubo ako ngayon, so ano. Okay, so now in 1673, Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the first person to see or to saw a microbe under a microscope. Now, Anton van was a lens grinder. So tagagawa siya ng lens. So because of that profession of Leeuwenhoek, he was able to make the first compound microscope. And by using that compound microscope, may nakita siya na yung sa water, there are moving, may naga-move doon sa water. So he was thinking, oh, there is something living in the water. At saka, he named or tinawag niya yung nakita niya doon sa water as animalcules. Bakit animalcules? Because animals can move while yung plants hindi. So from that, tinawag niya na animalcules, yung kanyang nakita. And then, 1 century later, so there was this Edward Jenner. By the way, Anton van is the father of microbiology. Then in 1796, there was this Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner was the person who, kumbaga siya nang nagsimula ng vaccination. So vaccination, ang ginawa ni Jenner noon, during that time, smallpox, a viral infection was so common. And then, pero nagtaka siya bakit yung mga persons working in the, sa may ranch ng mga baka, bakit hindi sila nakakasakit? And then there was this girl na nagka-smallpox rather. So ang ginawa niya, yung pustule, nilagyan niya. So he did something out of that. So from that, it was the first vaccination. Pero Jenner did not know the rationale behind that. It was Louis Pasteur 100 years later who explained that vaccination theory. And then there was this Ignaz Semmelweis. Now, the contribution of Ignaz Semmelweis was on hand disinfection. Kasi noon ang mga doctor, when they attend to their patients, they do not wash their hands. At saka there were no gloves during those time. So, ang contribution ni Semmelweis was that yung mga babae na nanganganak, so doctors attend to them but not washing their hands. So, he suggested na, would it be better if we wash our hands when we attend to our patients? So by doing that, the cases of puerperal fever, so pag sinabi natin puerperal fever, that is the fever that a woman who has given birth will have, no, because of infection. So because of hand washing, the cases of puerperal fever has declined. So that was the contribution of Ignaz Semmelweis. And I think up to now, hand disinfection is very, very important because at this time of the pandemic, di ba, ang sinasabi natin, what is our precaution? It is by washing hands, no? So, dapat mag-wash tayo ng hands. And then, of course, there was Louis Pasteur who had a very great contribution to microbiology. So we will discuss that later, no? Separately si Pasteur. And of course, Joseph Lister. No? So Joseph Lister was the one who first used the antiseptic phenol in surgery. So kasi noon, di ba, from Ignaz Semmelweis na hand washing, so Lister suggested na, would it be better if we use something that we can use as an antiseptic? But so yung phenol was the first antiseptic na ginamit ni Joseph Lister. Now going back to Pasteur, the contribution of Pasteur was, as we all know, pasteurization. Now, bakit nangyari yun siya? Because during that time, yung mga gumagawa ng wine, so, di ba, pag wine from the grapes, gawa sila. So, they will crush the grapes and they will get the wine. And then they will deliver it to different areas. Ang nangyayari, it takes 1 day to deliver the wine. So pagdating doon sa area kung saan nila i-deliver yung wine, hindi na siya wine. It will turn into an acid. So Pasteur devised a method na, what can we do, no, to preserve this wine? So yun nga, ginamitan niya yung pasteurization, meaning we subject the sugar into a heat lang, just enough, or heat just enough to kill the pathogenic microorganisms. para hindi siya makasira doon sa wine. So that was Louis Pasteur. Okay. But ayaw siya mag-move. Okay. Then we have the transition period. So before, it was Aristotle. So siya ang nag-ano nito, parang forerunner, spontaneous generation. So in this, sinasabi that living organism arise from non-living matter. So doon, they think na kahit walang buhay, it can produce life. Kasi like may tinapon sila na food. And then later on, when they found out meron ng mga maggots. So from that, they think na, that was already waste, pero bakit nagkaroon ng maggots doon? So they think of that. And that theory was accepted for many generations, no? No, that was by Aristotle. Kaya lang, what is the reason? What is the, sabi ni Aristotle, what is the reason why there is, why is it that living organism can arise from non-living? Ang sinasabi niya, there is a vital force daw. Vital force that forms life. So yun ang rationality ng spontaneous generation. But Louis Pasteur debated for that. Sabi niya, it's not like that. Only living organism can arise from pre-existing life. Meaning, only life can give life. Hindi pwede yung walang buhay will arise from that meron ng buhay. So, yun ang sinabi ni Louis Pasteur. And that was biogenesis, no? So, yun ang meaning bio, life. Genesis, the beginning. So, meaning, the beginning of life must also comes from life. So, yan ang nangyari noon. Kaya nagkaroon na kasi nga before, bakit ganun ang thinking nila Aristotle? Because they did not know about microorganisms. They have not seen that. So, meaning hindi nila makita. So, if hindi nila makita, there is no proof to that. Okay. And of course, there is Robert Koch, who has a very great contribution to microbiology. Now, he made the germ theory of disease. What do you mean by germ theory of disease? This means that a specific disease is caused by a specific microorganism or germ. So they call it germ. Di ba? Kahit nga sa inyo ngayon, di ba? When you were still young, yung mga mama, wash your hands, kaya na ay germs, no? So germ, that's a germ theory of disease. That a specific disease is caused by a specific organism. And Robert Koch was able to prove this because of his work on anthrax, no? So anthrax is caused by Bacillus anthracis. Okay. Now, the procedure that he used in proving the germ theory of disease becomes the postulates, Koch's postulates. So doon niya gi-base yung kanyang postulates, doon sa procedure na ginamit niya in proving the germ theory of disease. And then we have the development of pure culture technique. So kailangan, when you say pure culture technique, when we want, like for example, in an agar plate, kailangan yung isang microorganism na gusto nating i-culture, kailangan pure siya, meaning walang contamination. Because if there is contamination, then we cannot work properly on that. No? So we will not be able to tell if our results are, tawag nito, if our results is tama, if the culture itself is not pure. Okay? So that was Robert Koch. Then there were other figures, lalo na in the turn of the 20th century. Okay. So there are so many names no in micro, but I just included the ones that are very kumbaga, yung kanilang contribution excuse, is very kanang tawag ani, they made great contributions to micro, kumbaga. So in 1910, Paul Ehrlich was able to use or made salvarsan to treat syphilis. Syphilis is a bacterial infection which is transmitted sexually, no? So later we'll discuss the disease separately. So salvarsan yung ginamit ni Paul Ehrlich. Then in 1928, of course, Alexander Fleming. So the discovery of penicillin from a fungi, Penicillium notatum. Now, Alexander Fleming did not really intend to discover penicillin. It was by chance, by serendipity, na na-discover niya ang kanyang penicillin. But it was not used during the discovery. It was years later when ginamit ang penicillin. And then in the 1930s, sulfonamides was synthesized, no? Na-synthesize ang sulfonamides. Now, the first sulfa drug that was made was a sulfanilamide, no? But it was not used as an antimicrobial in the 1930s na. It was discovered in 1906, but it was not made, kumbaga, wala lang siya. Walang contribution, but it was made, used as an antimicrobial in 1930s. And then, of course, the birth of the genetic engineering, recombinant DNA technology. So this is very, very useful, especially when we are using now, or when we are producing our insulin. No? So the bacteria E. coli is very useful in producing insulin. So this is the technology that we're, and I think until now, so we are into innovations of recombinant DNA technology. What can we still do, no, for this tawag nito, for this kung ano pa ang kanyang pwedeng mag-contribution in microbiology. Okay, so those are just the few of the contributors to microbiology, no, in brief history niya. Okay, so let us begin with our journey in micro. So microbiology, by the term itself, microbiology. So pag sinabing biology is the study of life. But since micro siya, it is the study of microorganisms. So when we say microorganisms, so they are organisms that are very minute enough to be seen by the naked eye. So we cannot see them with our naked eye, but we have to use a microscope to be able to see them. Now they can be, so the microorganism can be a large and diverse group, no, that exists. They can either exist as a single cell or they can exist as a cluster of cells. No, the microorganisms can be your archaea, your bacteria, protozoa, algae, fungi, and even acellular entities. But if you would ask, Ma'am, bakit acellular? Biology meaning my life, di ba? Pag sinabi nating cell, meron siyang life. Bakit yung acellular? The reason is that kasi they belong to the microscopic, no? Before, sabi ko nga, if you can still remember, when I was in college, the virus is considered a cell. Cell pa siya noon. Under siya sa cell. But later on, when I started teaching, dili naman din siya cell. Acellular na siya. And after that, nakadiscover na rin na meron na mga prions. So these two are acellular entities. They are not cell, meaning they do not have life in itself. Okay. So yan. Now let us go to the classification of microorganisms. So if you see in your screen, so microorganisms can be divided as being cellular or acellular. So cellular, they can be prokaryotes or eukaryotes. So the prokaryotes are your archaea, your bacteria, and your eukaryotes are your algae, protozoa, and fungi. Yung acellular nyo naman are the viruses and the prions. Now, the red ones na ginawa kong red ang kanyang letters are those that we're going to discuss in the later slides. Okay. So, diba sinabi natin eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells? Ito yung mga acellular. So, pag sinabi natin acellular, so what are the difference of a eukaryotic from a prokaryotic cell? So in terms of form, your eukaryotes are multicellular. So one living organism is made up of many cells. The prokaryotes are single. Then eukaryotes have a true nucleus kasi nga may nuclear membrane. And inside the nuclear membrane is your chromosome or your DNA in a eukaryotic cell. Sa prokaryotic cell naman, wala silang nucleus, but they have DNA which is found in the cytoplasm or the fluid portion of the cell. So organelles, your eukaryotes do not have your eukaryotes rather, merong mga organelles. While your prokaryotes, wala silang organelles. Ang sterols, eukaryotic cells always have sterols. In prokaryotes, wala sila except for mycoplasma. And then sa ribosomes, they differ in that the eukaryotes may 80S, yung prokaryotes naman is 70S. Then cell wall. Eukaryotic cell, either walang cell wall, or kung meron ng cell wall ang isang eukaryotic cell, it is composed of either cellulose or chitin or chitin. Ang prokaryotes, the cell wall is composed mainly of peptidoglycan. With regards to division, so your eukaryotes divides by mitosis, while your prokaryotes does not divide by mitosis. It's in another form, your binary fission naman yung sa kanila. So this is an representation of a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. So ang prokaryotic cell ninyo, if you notice, may cytoplasm siya, so the fluid portion of the cell, may nucleus siya, and then may capsule, which is the outermost layer. Next to that is the cell wall, and next to that is the cytoplasmic membrane. And then outside the cell wall, you can find your pili, if it is my fimbriae or pili, or it can have flagella. No? So this is a prokaryotic cell. Bacteria have this kind of cell. Dito naman is the eukaryotic. So tayo, belonging to the kingdom Animalia, our cell is a eukaryotic cell. So we have our cell membrane, no? And then the ribosomes, the nucleus. So this is, so meron siyang true nucleus, na inside of which is meron doon ang inyong chromosomes or the DNA. Then may mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell, and all the other components of the eukaryotic cell. So you know all of those, no? Yang part ng eukaryotic cell. Okay. So prokaryotes, let's begin our discussion with prokaryotes, then eukaryotes, and then the acellular. So prokaryotes. Ano ang prokaryotes? So prokaryotes, they have one circular chromosome and it is not membrane bound. No, walang membrane bound. Yung chromosome nila kasi nga wala silang nucleus. A true nucleus rather. Then wala silang histones. Now ano yung histones? Histones are found in eukaryotic cell. Now, in the histones, ito siya ang basic protein that pack and order the DNA into structural units called nucleosomes. So, makikita mo lamang ang histone in a eukaryotic cell, but not in a prokaryotic cell. Then, another thing, your prokaryotes do not have organelles. So, wala sila ng mga mitochondrion, mga lysosomes, and all those other organelles. And they have cell wall that is made up mainly of peptidoglycan layer. And they divide by binary fission. Okay. Now, going back to histone, yung histone, sabi ko nga, nandun siya sa eukaryotic cell. Ang function niya is it provides structural support to a chromosome. So in order for very long DNA molecules to fit into the cell nucleus, they wrap around complexes of histone proteins, giving the chromosome a more compact shape. And some variants of histones are associated with the regulation of your gene expression. So yun ang sa histones na function in the eukaryotic cell. Okay. So in the prokaryotes, we have archaea and bacteria. Archaea, wala siya masyadong importance, no medical importance. But just the same, just to let you know, so genetically, they are closely related to eukaryotes than they are to bacteria. But even though with that, they are still considered a prokaryotic cell. They can vary in shape, and the cell walls do not have peptidoglycan. And they are extreme, so they live in extreme environments. So yung mga archaea, they can be found in extreme environment like in the ocean, subsea bed, the ocean bed. You can see there mga archaea, kaya nga extremophiles. Many of them, but not all, but they are that. Pag sinabi ding acidophiles, they can live in extreme acidity. Pag alkalinophiles, they can live in extreme alkaline environment. Pag thermophiles naman, they can live in extreme temperature. So yung mga ganyan. So sila yung mga archaea. But with regards to their contribution, wala masyado sa micro, no? Medical importance. Wala masyado. Okay. So now we go to bacteria. So bacteria, so alam naman natin na we live with bacteria. Now, there are so many microorganisms, there are so many kinds of bacteria, but only a few are pathogenic. No? So, pag sinabi natin, ay, nagkasakit siya, nagkaroon ng bacterial infection. Now, if we're going to name all bacteria, only a few are pathogenic. Pag sinabi natin pathogenic, they can cause disease. So, kumbaga, maihap lang. No? Because there are many thousands of bacteria. So, bacteria are unicellular. So, pag sinabi natin unicellular, meaning one bacteria is made up of one cell. And they divide by binary fission. So, pag sinabing binary, 2. So, fission, division. So, always divide into one cell will divide into 2 cells. And then 2 cells na naman. So, always like that. No? Yun ang sa division nila. And sa size naman nila, so the sizes of bacteria can range from 0.2 to 1 micrometer by 2 to 8 micrometers. So that is the length and the width of bacteria. Kasi di ba noon, usually in my time, makita na mo ang pictures of bacteria is just flat lang. But later on, like ang cell di ay, dili day siya flat because inside the cell napag yung mga structures. So, mo na siya. Okay. So, this is a representative picture of a bacterial cell. No? So, kumbaga, gibutang na niya ng structure na naadiha. So, no, you have your pila, your cytoplasmic granule, your spores, so everything. So, this is just representation. Kasi hindi naman lahat ng bacteria may flagellum. Hindi naman lahat may pila, yung ganon. Okay, so, pero nilagay na nila lahat doon. So, it will depend on the type of bacteria. Okay. We go to the shape and arrangement of your bacteria. So, familiar na kayo mo ani. So, with regards to shape, so meron tayong cocci. Pag sinabing cocci, they are spherical or round. So, lingin. And pag cocci, they can exist in chains. So, pag kagaya ng picture na pinakita ko kanina, so if you can see them in chains, so that is streptococcus. So, streptococcus. No? Kasi isa lang man, cocci ko, marami. If they appear in pairs, always in 2, just like your Neisseria gonorrhea, that is a diplococci. And if they appear like grapes, cluster, parang grapes, so that is your Staphylococcus aureus. You remember we use Staphylococcus aureus in our microlab. Okay? So pag cocci, pag spherical. Pag cylindrical naman or rod shape, they call it bacilli. No? So example of bacteria na bacilli in shape are your Escherichia coli or your E. coli and your Pseudomonas. So those are just some of the examples. And merong mga bacteria na combination of the coccus and the bacillus. They are short but rounded rods. So they are coccobacilli. So example of this is your Haemophilus influenzae, mga ganon. Then you have your spirochetes and spirilla. So they are like a helix, no? Helical like corkscrew. You know a screw. So helical like corkscrew. So very famous example is your Treponema pallidum, your causative agent for syphilis. Then we have your Vibrio, comma-shaped rods. So they are rods, but they are like a comma. So Vibrio cholerae. So usually the name carries the shape, no? Like Vibrio cholerae, Staphylococcus, yung mga ganon. And then may mga bacteria na pleomorphic. Pag sinabi natin pleomorphic, they appear or they exist in many forms. So wala din siya specific na form. So kumbaga pwede silang all forms. They can be a cocci or Vibrio or whatever, a bacilli. So your Legionella, your species of Legionella and Corynebacterium. Okay, so later we'll discuss these examples of bacteria when we go to the types or classification. Okay, so this is a tawag nito, a picture, no? Yung Staphylococcus, cluster, strepto, in chain. No. This is chain, pero duha lang siya. And this one is the common na chain, no? Streptococcus pyogenes, kasi this is a bacilli, no? Then, Coco bacilli, duha siya, Coco bacilli ang form. Then, Bacillus anthracis, your Haemophilus, Vibrio, and your Borrelia burgdorferi. Okay? So, the ones in violet, this one are gram-positive. And this one are gram-negative. So, we will know later on sa difference sa ilahang duha. Okay. Now, let's go to the cytoplasm. So, di ba ang mga prokaryotic cell have cytoplasm? So, the cytoplasm is the aqueous portion of the cell. So, doon mayroong protein. So, embedded doon ang protein, ang nucleic acid, dissolved organic compounds, and mineral and salts. And also, in the cytoplasm of a prokaryotic cell or bacteria, nandun ang enzymes and storage granules. So, nandun lahat naka-embed, no? Doon sa cytoplasm. Now, the cytoplasmic structures. So, ano yung mga structures na nakikita natin doon sa cytoplasm? You have your ribosomes. So, like your eukaryotic cell, ang prokaryotic cell naman, bacteria, also have ribosomes because this is the site of protein synthesis. Kagaya din sa atin, kaya lang 70S lang yung sa kanila. And usually, bacteria, when we do or when we make antimicrobials for antibacterial therapies, one of the components that we target kumbaga gina-target nato na ma-destroy sa bacteria is the ribosomes, because if the ribosomes is targeted and it is destroyed, then they cannot synthesize proteins, and if proteins are not synthesized, eventually that bacteria will lyse or will die. Then meron silang chromosome. Yung chromosome nila, nandun yung genetic material din, single, double-stranded, or circular molecule. So, yun ang ano nila. And the circular molecule that is contained is, nandun siya sa nucleoid, yung chromosome. And of course, your plasmids. So, plasmids are small, circular, extra. So, extra chromosomal DNAs. Di ba sabi natin, meron silang chromosome. But besides the chromosomes, they have extra. So, yun ang plasmids, no? Which contains the DNA. You can follow, that is in your, some of these are in your notes. Excuse. You can follow, no? Naana sa page na ninyo sa inyong katokong gihatag. Okay. So, cytoplasmic structure. Now we go to the cytoplasmic membrane. So, a bacterial cytoplasmic membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. So, bilayer, dalawa, made up of of lipids, no? And similar to eukaryotes. Pero, the only difference is that walang sterols. So, phospholipid bilayer, similar to eukaryotes without the presence of sterols. Now, but meron siyang very important function in a bacteria, ang cytoplasmic membrane. Now, the phospholipid arrangement of the cytoplasmic membrane is very important for creating permeability barrier. No? Permeability barrier. Kumbaga, it will, para siyang door, no? That will allow or not allow substances to enter into the cell. No? Because of that layer. No? So, kung ayaw niyang papasukin, it cannot come into the cell. So, that is maintaining cell integrity, no? And then meron siyang regulate transport. Kung it will only allow substances inside the cell and other specialized functions. So that is your cytoplasmic membrane. Excuse. Then we go to the cell wall. Now, the cell wall is a very important tawag nito, component of the bacteria. It is the outermost layer of a bacteria. So, the integrity of a bacterial cell lies on the cell wall. So, ang cell wall is composed of the peptidoglycan. So, your NAG and your NAM. So, your NAG stands for N-acetylglucosamine and your NAM is N-acetylmuramic acid. So, this is the component of your peptidoglycan sa cell wall ng bacteria ninyo. Now, this peptidoglycan is a rigid structure that will give shape to the cell. And it has a very important function that is to protect the cell from lysis by osmotic pressure. So, kumbaga, protection siya, no? So, kaya nga, di ba, ang antibiotics, one mechanism of action of antibiotics or antimicrobials rather, is to destroy the cell wall, no? So, if the cell wall of a bacteria is destroyed, definitely, the integrity of that bacteria is also destroyed. So, pwede na siyang mapasok. And with that, we can already lyse or kill the bacteria. So, that is a very important mechanism of antimicrobials by destroying the cell wall of bacteria. Then another structure, your glycocalyx. So, ang glycocalyx can either be loose or firm. No? So, it is a thick layer of slimy, gelatinous material located outside the cell wall. So, outside siya ng cell wall. Now, this is produced by the cell membrane. So, ang nag-produce yung cell membrane inside, it will be secreted outside the cell wall. So, pag ang glycocalyx is loosely attached to the cell, we term it as slime. Pag ano naman siya, firmly attached to the cell wall, we call it a capsule. Now, the difference is that yung slime, when it comes to organization, the slime is not highly organized, while your capsule is highly organized. And sa attachment naman, your slime layer is not that attached to the cell wall compared to the capsule. No? What is the function? So the function of this is for gliding or slide along solid surfaces, evasion from phagocytosis, adherence, no? So yun ang examples of bacteria na may glycocalyx are your Pseudomonas aeruginosa and your Haemophilus influenzae. So yan, those are just some of the examples. One of capsule. Diba? Pag sinabi natin capsule, firmly attached to the cell wall. Remember, your capsule is the major virulence factor. I included that as one of the question in the pre-test. So I hope you got it right lahat ha. So virulence, so major virulence. What do we mean pag sinabi natin virulence? It is the capacity of the bacteria to cause a disease. No? If a bacteria is very virulent, so meaning it can produce a disease. Pero pag ang bacteria is less virulent, meaning you will not worry, kumbaga your worry is medyo konti lang kasi less virulent naman siya. But there are a lot of, bakit ganon? Bakit may mga bacteria na very virulent? Some of these bacteria, ang virulence nila is because of the presence of a capsule sa kanila. Now, so, virulence factor siya. So, it acts as a barrier to toxic molecules. So, if the bacteria, meron siyang capsule, kahit may ginamit ka pa, like for example, like disinfect or whatever, but since it has a capsule, it can protect itself from these toxic molecules. So, kasi barrier. So, meaning it cannot allow penetration into the bacteria. And it prevents phagocytosis. So, phagocytosis, di ba? Kauron siya macrophages and neutrophils. So, these macrophages and neutrophils are there to eat up the bacteria para dili mag-cause of infection. But if the bacteria may capsule siya, pwede siyang hindi makain ng mga macrophage, no? Hindi siya ma-phagocytosize. Parang, di ba, pag sinabing phagocytosize, i-engulf. Hindi siya may engulf because of that capsule. And another thing also, it aids in adherence of the organism to host cell and then biological surfaces. O, ito siya. So, when we say adherence, makadikit. So, pag may capsule, yung kapit niya doon sa host cell is much stronger. And another thing, it can also adhere not only to live host cells, but also to non-biological surfaces. So, kumbaga, kahit pa nandun lang siya kunyari sa surface ng kunyari ng floor or ng table, pwede siyang dumikit doon, no? Kasi nga it can adhere to non-biological surfaces. So because of this function ng capsule, it can all of this, yung barrier protection, yung prevents phagocytosis and adherence, if you combine all of this, so that would make a major virulence factor for a specific type of bacteria. Okay. Another structure is your flagella. So flagella, kasi meron namang ibang extensions. So flagellas are also like extensions, no? Thread-like appendages or extension of helically coiled protein subunits, which we call flagellin. So made up siya of flagellin, in short, ang flagella ninyo. And when a bacteria has a flagella, they use it for movement, no? So yung mga bacteria na may flagella, they can move. But the function of the flagella is for chemotaxis, motility, and they run or they move by run and tumble movement. Murbag mudagan, mutumbling, ingon ana. Now, there are many types of cells of flagella, no? If a cell, if you look at the picture, yung atricus, medyo maliit lang. Ay, wala siya, wala. In short, ciliated lang siya, wala siyang flagella. Kasi ang flagella are long extensions. Minsan mataas pa siya kaysa cell. Mono, isa lang. On one side, either asa nga side. Now, pag isang side lang, pero hindi isa, marami siya, we call it lophotrichus. Pag both ends naman, amphi, like amphibians, di ba? They can live in water or soils. Okay, ito amphitrichus. Pag all over the body of the cell, peritrichus. Yung amphilophotrichus, ano siya, both ends, di ba ang lopo isang end, yung kung dalawa, so amphilophotrichus siya. Ang hirap namang sorry. So these are the types, no? So ang function nito is for movement, no? Movement. And you have also another extensions, your pilus or your fimbriae. Pilay pag marami, no? Fimbria isa, fimbriae marami. So these are hair-like structures. Look at the picture. So hair-like, this one. And it is made up of protein, which is pilin. So the protein making up your fimbriae or your pilay is pilin. Now they are thinner than flagella. So medyo payat siya compared to flagella, but it is not associated for movement or motility. So itong cell na to, meron siyang pilay, meron din siyang flagellum, no? Okay. Now, what is the function of a pilay? Adherence or attachment. So, just like your Neisseria gonorrhea na bacteria, it is fimbriated. Now, that fimbriae there is used to attach. And kaya nga, your Neisseria gonorrhea is also a virulent, no, pathogen, which is sexually transmitted. So, even with just one sexual contact with a person na merong Neisseria gonorrhea, you can have gonorrhea also because of that. Kasi yung the bacteria will attach doon sa genitals and causing the infection. Now, pwede din siyang gamitin yung pilay as sex pilus. So, pag sinabi natin sex pilus, they are used for conjugation, no? Conjugation. Now, the pilus is observed most in gram-negative bacteria. So, mostly ang mga fimbriated are gram-negative bacteria. So example is your Proteus vulgaris, which can cause urethritis or inflammation of the urethra. And of course, yung sinabi kong Neisseria gonorrhea. No? So yun siya ang examples. Endospores. So the endospores naman are dehydrated multi-shelled structures formed by gram-positive organisms in response to adverse conditions. So, may mga gram-positive organisms which are capable of forming a spore. Now, if an bacteria is able to form a spore, that spore will protect the bacteria from heat or extremes of heat or temperature. It can protect the bacteria from dehydration. It can protect the bacteria from radiation, chemicals, and starvation. So para bang it's a defense mechanism of a bacterial cell when they undergo spore formation. And a bacteria which is in the spore stage, kumbaga meron siyang spore, it can remain dormant for years. When we say dormant, it can just stay there. It cannot be killed, but just stay there. Dormant lang siya. Kumbaga, wa siya gihimo, but it is not killed. And after how many years, pwede siyang maging vegetative state na naman. Meaning, from being dormant, it becomes active. And pag naging active yan, it can cause infection. So, marami yung mga ganyan na may mga bacteria na akala mo like mga re-emerging infections, maybe they have been dormant for so many years kaya hindi natin alam na merong ganyong infection. And then all of a sudden, nagkaroon ng infection. Maybe because of that, no? Kasi they can, para bang, diha lang siya. Ni murabag kung para sa mga bears na, unsa na sila na, anong tawag dyan na, yung mga polar bears that they can stay asleep for how many months because it's winter, walang food. So they will just stay asleep. Ano yon? Hibernate. Hibernate. Opo. Sige, mag-hibernate. If yung mga bears nag-hibernate, yung mga bacteria, yung form of hibernation nila is yung mag-form sila ng spores. And they can be dormant for years. Just imagine years, ha? For years. What if that years is 20 years? Pwede. It's very possible, no? So kaya minsan, yung mga ganito, hindi mo lang alam magkakaroon na ng infection. No? Matingala na lang, anong ingon ana. So exposure to water and nutrients, the endospore will become active, no? If they're exposed to water and nutrients. So di naman sila mag-starve. So muna, na they can live again and can cause infection. So that is your endospores. Okay. So those are just some of the structures that we can find in a bacteria. Now let us go to the requirements for growth. What are the requirements for growth of bacteria? So first is physical requirements. So yung mga bacteria, some bacteria needs a specific temperature in able to survive. If you place them in an extreme temperature, dili na sila, they will be killed, no? Or pH, specific pH, or osmotic pressure. Kaya nga minsan, these are requirements for growth. Now, if you want to kill them, pwede natin itong gamitin. Like, we subject it to very high temperature. That is the reason why we sterilize our things, why we autoclave. Why? Because you want to kill the bacteria, because they cannot live with the temperature. Or pH. Like, for example, if that bacteria lives in an alkaline pH, what do? We decrease the pH para maging acidic ang environment. So, pag acidic na ang environment, that bacteria will not be able to live or survive. And then pressure, of course, no? So, those are physical requirements. Pwede rin, what about the chemical requirements? So, water, oxygen. Now, oxygen, there are bacteria na sinasabing obligate aerobes. Pag sinabing obligate aerobes, they cannot live without oxygen. Meron ding obligate anaerobes. They cannot live with oxygen. Yung mga ganun. Or, ang iba, they need to have carbon dioxide in order to survive. Carbon, nitrogen, and minerals. And then, media. Okay? So, when we try to grow bacteria in a laboratory, just like yung ginawa natin, so meron tayong mga media, no? Now, the media can be enriched, selective, or differential. Yung ginawa natin is wala dito, no? It was just a, what did we use ba? I forgot. Di ba? When we have our plating before, so media yun siya. Pag enriched media, example is blood agar. So there are bacteria that will only grow in a blood agar media. Pag selective naman, merong mga bacteria that grow in Saborod's dextrose agar. So kailangan may dextrose present. And pag differential, yung mga makangke, no, depende. So we can only we can only let them grow sa laboratory by using this media. Okay, so those are the requirements for growth. Okay, do you have any questions before we go to the types of bacteria? None so far?
Ma'am, yung obligate aerobes, please.
Yes?
Yung obligate aerobes and obligate anaerobes. Ano ulit yun, ma'am?
Ang obligate aerobes, they cannot live without oxygen. So meaning, kailangan nila si oxygen in order to survive. Yung obligate anaerobes naman, they cannot live with oxygen. So ayaw nila si oxygen. Yung ganun. Okay na, Leo?
Apo, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Sige. So we go now to the types of bacteria. So there are 3 types of bacteria. Your gram-positive, your gram-negative, and your acid-fast bacteria. We go to the first, your gram-positive. So your gram-positive bacteria have a thick cell wall. So 40 layers thick down, no? And of this cell wall, it is made up of 90% peptidoglycan. And it has a teichoic acid and lipoteichoic acid. Now, your lipoteichoic acid, ang function niya is it anchors the cell wall to the cytoplasmic membrane. So, para mo pilit, mo anchor ang cell wall dito sa, di ba, kaya naman siya yung cell wall, di ba, capsule, cell wall, cytoplasmic membrane. So, para magdikit sila, kailangan si lipoteichoic acid. And yung kanyang teichoic acid naman on surface is negatively charged. So, yun si gram-positive bacteria. Si gram-negative naman, yung kanyang structure ng cell wall niya is complicated or complex when it is compared to your gram-negative. Kasi thinner siya, so yung peptidoglycan layer niya is thinner, and then wala siyang teichoic or lipoteichoic acid. Pero, meron siyang outer membrane. No? So, manipis ang kanyang cell wall, walang teichoic or lipoteichoic acid, pero meron siyang sinasabing outer membrane. Now, this outer membrane, ang function niya is a permeability barrier. So, kumbaga, siya yung nagsiserve as the barrier. No? So, yun siya ang difference. And then, another thing is that, yung mga gram-negative bacteria, yung kanilang cell wall, meron sinasabing lipopolysaccharide, which we call as endotoxin. Diba? If you have read, a specific bacteria produces an endotoxin. So meaning siya mismo ang nag-produce. Kasi pag exo outside, pag endo, the bacteria itself makes it. Now, this lipopolysaccharide or the LPS is an infection factor. So it contributes to the infection that is caused by the bacteria. And usually, this can lead to inflammation, fever, and shock. Now, the LPS endotoxin is toxic to humans because it will activate the immune response. So, activator siya ng immune response. Itong LPS na sinasabi natin. So, if you look at the picture, tingnan nyo ang cell wall. Ang cell wall ng gram is very thick. Ang cell wall ng gram negative, ito lang. This one lang. Duha lang ka layer. Ang kani pila na 40 daw to no, di ba ingon? Okay. So ang cell membrane naman nila, meron siyang difference. Pareho lang inner. Pero di ba sinasabi ko, previous slide, meron ito siyang outer membrane. Ito ang outer. So, if this is gram-positive, after the cell wall, wala na. Teichoic acid na lang o lipoteichoic acid na lang. Kanina lang siya ang naa. Diba? Ang lipoteichoic acid, sabi ko, it anchors the cell wall to the cytoplasmic membrane. Mura siyang haligi. Sa gram-negative naman, yung kanyang cell wall is thin, but meron pa siyang another layer outside, outside of the cell, which is the outer membrane. Ito siya. And this outer membrane serves as a permeability barrier. Ito. Kaya, mas mahirap i-treat in reality ang gram-negative kaysa gram-positive infections. Okay? So, yon ang difference. Because of these characteristics of the gram-negative cell wall. So, how do we know if a bacteria is either gram-positive or gram-negative? So, di ba we do gram staining? I think I have let you demo before how to do gram staining. So, these are the procedures. So, meron tayong initial stain, which is your crystal violet. Crystal violet is the initial stain. And then, we have our, what is the use of your gram iodines here? Anybody? Anong gamit ni gram iodine dito? Walay mo tubag? Are you asleep now? Hagutin. Gisa makita na ko diri sa akong gallery. Hagutin. What do we call what is the function of the gram iodine here? Misagutin?
Ma'am.
Anong function ni gram iodine dito? Diba si crystal violet is the initial stain. Si gram, after placing crystal violet, ato siyang i-rinse and we place it with iodine. Ano?
Mordant, ma'am. Mordant.
Okay. Mordant. Or, anong mordant or anong ibang pangalan ni mordant? Anybody? Marcelo, Mr. Marcelo. Ano?
Hello, ma'am.
Ano siya? Mordant or meron siyang ibang parang
Dry
later.
fixative.
Fixative or fixator. Okay, sige. Thank you. So, yan. So, muna siya. So, mordant. Now, after placing your mordant, you rinse it, then you decolorize with alcohol, acid alcohol to be exact. For gram-positive, the initial stain will not be removed. But for gram-negative, after placing the decolorizer, the initial stain will be removed. Then after nyan, you place safranin. What is the function of safranin, Gonzaga? Tusi, Gonzaga, ano sa function ni safranin? Ano sa function ni safranin? De Luna, o Gonzaga?
Ma'am?
De Luna, anong
Safranin.
function ni safranin?
Ano siya, ma'am? Counter stain?
Okay, counter stain. So, your safranin serves as a counter stain. That is why at the end of the staining procedure, if your bacteria is positive, the initial stain's color will remain. But if the bacteria is gram-negative, it will take up the color of the counter stain, which is the red, no? Safranin. Kani violet. So, after staining, pag makita ni mga violet siya, gram-positive. Pag nakita nimo siya nga red, gram-negative. Now, when do we use this? Asa man ni siya importante ning procedure na gram staining? Excuse me. I will give an example. if for example, you suspect that a patient, female patient is having, kunyari, how to diagnose if a patient has gonorrhea. No, gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is caused by Neisseria gonorrhea. And Neisseria gonorrhea, unsa siya na bacteria? Positive or negative? Asa man ni? Anoche? Unsa si gonorrhea? Positive, negative? Miss Anoche? Positive, negative?
Negative po.
Okay, negative. Okay, tama. So, ang Neisseria gonorrhea is negative. Now, if you want to know or to diagnose if the patient meron siyang gonorrheal infection or wala, so you get a kanang smear, no? You make a smear from the genital area of that patient and then you do the gram stain procedure. So, in the end, after nag-gram stain procedure ka, pag ang result in the end is violet, unsa ang conclusion, Mr. No? What is the conclusion if after gram staining, violet imong nakuha? Modif.
Gram positive, ma'am.
So ano ang conclusion mo? Ano ang conclusion mo sa pasyente? Ha? Okay, the gram stain man ka, ang result kay violet. Unsa man ang imong conclusion nga ibutang?
Positive, ma'am.
Positive ug unsa? What do you mean by positive?
Positive. Positive siya ng gonorrhea mo.
Do you agree, Hirada? Daniel Hirada, do you agree?
Hello, ma'am.
Do you agree with Mr. Modif's answer?
Yes,
Ay,
ma'am.
negative ba lang?
Ayan.
Unsa man Modif?
Ano answer niya, ma'am?
Ang sabi ko,
No.
Negative ba
at
lang?
the end, ang imong
Negative daw,
nakuha
ma'am.
is negative 4? Negative 4?
Gonorrhea, ma'am.
So
Gonorrhea.
meaning,
Gonorrhea.
nasa gonorrhea, wala?
Wala.
Wala,
Okay,
ma'am,
wala. Because ang imong
Basig na
nakuha is violet. Kung nakakuha ka nga ang color is red, wingon ka nga ang pasyente na ay gonorrhea. So that is the application of the gram staining procedure. And they use it in laboratories, lalo na pag yung anak na cases. Okay? Sige. Na ako ikuan ani dire man naaman ko app na wala na ko na kuan ready ka tong wheel of something na siya mo pili kinsay tawagon. Ako tong iano unya ha sa inyo ha. Okay. So we go now to the different examples of gram-positive organisms. Okay. You can look at your copy sa inyong page 1095 of the notes I send you, but there are other also important things that I have included, no, I have added besides what is in your handouts. Excuse me. First is we just get a representation of hindi natin sali lahat kay sa inyo daghan kaayo gikuha na nako ang most common cause of infection because if I add up, so kung ano yung giano natin gi-discuss, expect na doon lang din ako magkuha ng quiz, ang question sa quiz. Yung hindi ko gi-discuss na nandun sa notes nandun sa PDF na gi-send ko, wala yung kasali, hindi yung kasali. Okay. First is Staphylococcus aureus. So from the name Staphylococcus, the bacteria is cocci, which is in clusters. Now, Staphylococcus aureus, the mode of transmission, the route of transmission rather, is person to person. No? But remember that Staphylococcus aureus is part of our natural or normal flora, meaning lahat tayo niyan meron sa skin natin ng Staph aureus. Normal flora kasi siya. But pwede kang pwede kang ma-infect, no? So, what is the very common disease that is caused by your Staphylococcus aureus? Your boils. You know what's boils? Musta na sa Bisaya? Sagaryo. Tagalog o Bisaya ng boils? Sagaryo? Alaw, nakabalo. Pigsa. Sa Bisaya, pigsa sa Tagalog sa Bisaya. Sa ba sa Bisaya?
Matag
Kalimutan.
tiki, ma'am.
Matag tiki, oh, mata sa tiki, no, matag tiki, oh. Mo na siya ang cause ana, di ba matingala mo minsan nga, matingala na ka ano na naghubag sa imong skin nga wala man siya ka ng wala man kay gihimo. Kasi nga the bacteria is para endemic siya, normal flora. Kaya lang if nagkaroon ng medyo maliit na cut na hindi mo nakita, pwede siya mag-cause ng infection. Now, your boils produce an exotoxin. Exotoxin, no? Kaya nga minsan may mga cases na this exotoxin, pag hindi mo siya gitreat, it can become systemic infection and pwede kang mamatay from having a, kumbaga pag sinabi nating systemic, ang dami mo ng pigsa all over your body, no? It can also cause scalded skin syndrome, no? Yung ano yung skin mo parang nagapaknit, kumbaga ano ba yan sa Tagalog, hindi ko alam. Basta yun, scalded skin syndrome, no? So that is your Staphylococcus aureus. So in your handouts, cutaneous infection. So sinabing skin. So meron pa impetigo, folliculitis, furuncles, carbuncles. So these are just para-pareho lang siya sa boils, no? So this is the, so sabi ko nga meron siyang toxin, that is why it can cause toxic shock syndrome, your TSS, toxic shock syndrome. And even it can cause food poisoning. Okay. Second is your Streptococcus pneumoniae. So it is in chains. So Streptococcus pneumoniae, asymptomatic colonization of your respiratory route siya. Asymptomatic colonization. So you can have person-to-person transmission with Streptococcus pneumoniae. From the name itself, it can cause pneumonia. But it can also cause meningitis, endocarditis, and bacteremia. Okay. Now, the major virulence factor of your Streptococcus pneumoniae is the capsule. So, meron siyang capsule. Kaya nga, yun ang kanyang virulence factor. Remember that, ha? And it is one of the major cause of adult pneumonia, ang Streptococcus pneumonia. So, adult pneumonia, so very common. It can also cause adult meningitis and otitis media. Otitis media is katong, kung sa Bisaya, pagibuog, no? If you know that one, I don't know the Tagalog of that. So that is otitis media. So caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. Another gram-positive is your Streptococcus pyogenes. This is highly virulent, no? Very virulent, kumbaga. It can produce cytolytic toxins and exotoxins. That is why it is considered very highly virulent. So it can cause person-to-person ang mode of transmission through respiratory droplets. It can cause pharyngitis, so inflammation of the pharynx, scarlet fever, and toxic shock syndrome, and rheumatic fever. And sometimes it can cause your necrotizing fasciitis, no? Yung necrotizing fasciitis, yung sinasabi nila na kinakain ng bacteria yung part kung saan siya nag-infect, no? Flesh-eating bacteria. Flesh-eating, yun. Necrotizing fasciitis. So those are the three gram-positive cocci that are very, kumbaga, important to micro, no? But there are other, like your epidermis, saprophytes, so, basta yun lang, tatlo. The other things we will not, ano na, kasi may mga opportunistic infection naman siya. Okay? Okay. If you have any question, you just raise your hand, ha? Or you can unmute yourself. Then we go to gram-positive RADS. So, Bacillus anthracis, the cause of your anthrax. So, anthrax can be cutaneous anthrax, respiratory anthrax, or gastrointestinal anthrax. So, tatlo yan siya. But the most common is the cutaneous anthrax. So, it is the only bacteria with amino acid capsule, ang Bacillus anthracis. And it is the largest bacteria, no? Now, ang Bacillus anthracis, yung cutaneous anthrax, it can produce toxin, exotoxin, which can cause tissue necrosis. So, meaning that the tissue that is being infected will die later. So, necrotize, mamatay, kumbaga yung part ng tissue, yung tissue na yon, no? Meron din siyang tawag nito, sa di ba, cutaneous inhalational. So, inhalational, we call this, okay, sino sa inyo ang alam what's the other name for anthrax? What is the, di ba anthrax is the disease? What is the other name for that disease? Sige daw, be. +5 sa inyong quiz. Now na, answer me. Wala mo kabalo?
Ma'am, try lang.
O sige, kinsa ne? Di ako na ko makita asa kinsa naga. Jericho?
Si Franz, ma'am. Hi, ma'am.
Si
Franz.
apelyido.
Sinarillos.
O sinarillas unsa?
Tao pa?
Dili.
Ay, dili, di ay. Sige, wrong.
Tripod.
Ah, yung state your, di ma kung dili na ako makita yung noun, state your apelyido. Sige.
Segundo, ma'am. Ay, sorry.
Sino na una? Sige. Sino na una?
Ulo na yun ko.
Siya na lang, ma'am.
Oh,
Sige, sige. Yes,
Balik-
ma'am. Try lang, ma'am. Lover's disease ba, ma'am? Or mali? Ambot.
Segundo. I will tell later.
Ma'am, ako ma'am.
Oh,
Ma'am,
segundo, unsa mo answer?
bull sorter's disease, ma'am.
Okay. Wool sorter's disease. Did you know why it happened to be called wool sorter's disease? Because noon, people who are working as wool sorter, naga-sort ng wool. Wool is fabric man na siya nagikan sa ganing tawag ani sa mga sheep. Di ba? Ginagupitan ng mga sheep sa ilahang balhibo. And that this will be kanang tawag ani, this will be manufactured into a wool. Wool is a fabric. Now people who have that kind of job, they have inhalational anthrax. Nganuman, ma-inhale man to nila the bacteria coming from those. Kaya tinawag siya na wool sorter's disease. Yung GI naman, gastrointestinal anthrax, is rare, but it is fatal, no? But the most common is the cutaneous anthrax. And this is being used as a biowarfare. Used in biowarfare, no? Sa una sa US, padalan ka og letter, walay sulod abi nimo but na inhale na day nimo ang Bacillus anthracis. Okay. Then we go to the next, Corynebacterium diphtheriae. Anong shape? Si Corynebacterium, rod siya, pero anong shape niya? Pleomorphic, remember? It is varied in shape. So, si Corynebacterium diphtheriae is a gram-positive rod. So, it can produce a toxin. So, person-to-person spread, respiratory droplets or skin contact. Now, what is diphtheria? So, ang iyahang disease is diphtheria. This is the organism. The disease is diphtheria. Ano yung diphtheria? So, it is a disease which is manifested by difficulty of breathing, which can lead to heart failure in the end, paralysis, and eventually death. No? So, serious siya na bacterial infection that affects the mucous membranes of the nose and the throat. So, sa nose and the throat, upper respiratory tract infection siya. So, yun. But in advanced stage, the bacteria can damage the heart. That is why magka-heart failure. It can damage the kidney and the nervous system. So, magkaroon ng paralysis because the nervous system is affected. Now, but even with treatment, diphtheria can be deadly, especially in children. So kaya this is one of the, this disease is one, kumbaga merong vaccination ang mga bata nito, yung DPT, if you are familiar with that. DPT, so diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. So this is given at 6 I don't know if that is still the same today, 6 weeks of life. So from 6 weeks after birth, pwede natagaan ng bata og kani nga vaccine to prevent the diphtheria because this is very deadly in children, no? Kasi nga yun ang complication niya, it will just start from the nose and throat infection but it can lead to heart failure and paralysis. Okay. So yun ang because of that toxin na gina-produce ni ni diphtheria, no? Kasi because of that toxin kasi siya nagiging very infective. Okay. Then we go to the anaerobes. Positive gyapon ni ha, mga gram-positive pero anaerobes. O ano yung sinabi kong anaerobes kanina? They cannot live with oxygen. So ito sila ang kalaban nila si oxygen, no? So they would kumbaga dili nila gusto. So mura sila plants, di ba? Plants live on carbon dioxide while we will live on oxygen. So sila kaning mga anaerobes without oxygen. So the first is your Clostridium botulinum. Asa man mo familiar aning Clostridium botulinum? So Clostridium botulinum, so ingestion, the route of transmission, ingestion of the toxin, so it can cause infant botulism. So when you say botulism, it's food poisoning, form of food poisoning. Now, meron siyang ginaproduce na toxin. It produces a lethal neurotoxin. And the name of the toxin is botulinal toxin. No? Ano siya? Neurotoxin. So pag sinabing neuro, it affects the brain. So the name is botulinal toxin. But in cosmetics, this toxin is used in Botox. If you are familiar with Botox. So kanang Botox, ang gina-inject ana, di ba? Pag Botox ka, feeling ni mo like people na nagpa-Botox is parang firm kasi nga pa-firm do ilang naong, dili magsag. So firm ilang naong, mura pug mo gahi nga di ba na uban na murag naga-smile na lang firmy kay naka-fix na ba? Naka-fix na ang ilahang naong. Kasi gibutangan siya Botox. But it's very mild and in a very small amount lang. So lethal siya ha, pero ginagamit siya in beauty enhancement, no? Okay. So that is your your botulinum. It is also the cause of food poisoning in canned goods. No? Canned goods, pwede siya mag-grow dito kasi nga anaerobe man siya. So ang canned goods pag nakasil na siya, wala oxygen inside. 'Di ba? So, they like the environment na walang oxygen, kaya they can thrive there. So, kung pag-process pa lang sa canned foods, wala kaayo na kumbaga na nabilin dito, nga Clostridium, gisirahan nimo kasi canned siya, pwede siya mag-grow inside. No? Kasi nga anaerobe siya. Then we have Clostridium difficile. Si Clostridium difficile naman, usually, it can only affect pag ang normal flora mo is kanang na-disturb. Usually, this is related to antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So, the disease that is caused by Clostridium difficile is your pseudomembranous colitis. So, pseudomembranous meaning, dili dyan siya tinuod. No? Colitis, inflammation of the colon. And pseudomembranous colitis will lead to diarrhea. So, na mga antibiotics that the patient dahil mga antibiotics na ang ilahang adverse reaction is not really adverse, but side effect is pseudomembranous colitis. So you have to tell your patient na ingon ana gid siya. No? Kasi nga, yung pag na-disturb man gud nimo ang normal flora sa imong GIT, managhan sila. And pag managhan sila mo na mag-cause sila pseudomembranous colitis. Nganong nanaghan man sila, kay gipatay man sa imong antibiotic, gitake katong mga good bacteria in your gut. Okay. So that is your Clostridium difficile. Next is your Clostridium perfringens. So Clostridium perfringens is the cause of your gas gangrene. No? Soft tissue infections, we call it gas gangrene or myonecrosis. Usually, people with diabetes, tapos masamad sila, the disease, the wound is prone to this type of infection, your Clostridium perfringens. So magkaroon ng gas gangrene. Pag dili siya matambalan, i-amputate gid siya. No, the area i-amputate siya. Okay? Kasi nga it can cause necrosis, so meaning the tissue is already dead. So wala ka nang magawa pag ang tissue ng area na yun is patay na, so it has no function already, but you have to cut it off. And it is also foodborne. Pwede rin siyang sa food, ang Clostridium perfringens, no? Food poisoning, it can also cause. And of course, your Clostridium tetani, the cause of your tetanus. So tetanus, you get this type of bacteria from the soil. Kaya nga, when you were still young, you were told by your parents, dili magtiniil sa gawas, dili magtiniil sa soil. Because if meron kang, kunyari, ang uban, ay, na-tetanus mo na siya, ay, nasamad mo na siya, natunok o glansang. Di ba, usually, the cause of tetanus is punctured wound. Ngayon siya, ay, nga mo ikaw, punctured wound. Usually, the probability na tunog o glansang punctured wound. And then, nitama ka sa soil. And then, in that soil, naaday ang kuan, Clostridium tetani. So, it will enter your wound. Now, since it is anaerobe, so kung punctured wound, meaning ang wound is deep. So, pag deep ang wound, musulod dito si tetanus, and it will go inside jud. And kung dito siya sa sulod, wala na oxygen. So the environment there is what? Conducive to Clostridium tetani. Muna sa punctured wound, very prone yun na sila sa tetanus infection. Because the environment inside is very conducive to Clostridium since there is no oxygen. Di naman na maris sa oxygen dito. Now, pag masamad ka, pag punctured wound, the thing that you have to do is kumbaga, ang imong gamiton to clean the wound is better to use hydrogen peroxide. Why? Because imo dyan na siyang buuan dito sa sulod nga mo abot dito ang hydrogen kung pwede pa lang ano man. Because when you use hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, there is an excess of oxygen and that will be released. Pag ma-release na siya, katong nga oxygen, dili man ganahan si Clostridium tetani ang ng oxygen. So, pwede nimo siya mapatay with that, no? Just a precautionary measures, no? Better use a hydrogen peroxide when cleaning punctured wounds to prevent tetanus infection. So, mo na siya diha. And this type of organism produces a toxin. So, the toxin that is produced by your tetani is your tetanospasmin. And it can cause paralysis. That is why kanang people with tetanus, spastic paralysis. So, if nakahigda sila, kanang mag-curve na gani ilahang lawas, lalo na pag baby, common ani is kanang, pwede po ka, like tooth extraction, pwede magkakaroon ng tetanus infection, or sa baby, the cutting of the umbilical cord can cause tetanus infection, or sa mother naman, the episiotomy, when you say episiotomy, katong hiwa na himo in normal vaginal delivery, the episiotomy pwede siyang mag-cause ng tetanus infection for the mother. And for the child, pwede siyang mag-cause ng infection, the cutting of the umbilical cord. Kaya nga, mothers are advised to have vaccination against tetanus while pregnant so that pag manganak sila, apil na ang ilang baby protected from tetanus. Kasi pag hindi, after pag-deliver, you will be given HTIG, your human immunotetanoglobulin, to prevent infection. So that is the protocol, no? Kaya pag ang mama wala nagpa-vaccinate, tagaan dyan na siya and the baby with the HTIG to prevent the infection. Okay? Any question with the anaerobes? Okay. So next we go to spirochetes. So your spirochetes. These are your corkscrew, helical, no? Corkscrew motility. So ang spirochetes ninyo, we have your Borrelia burgdorferi, So it is the cause of Lyme disease. So Borrelia can cause Lyme disease. What is Lyme disease? So Lyme disease is a disease with symptoms of fever, headache, fatigue, and characteristic rash, skin rash called erythema migrans, no? So muna siya, no, pag sinabing Lyme disease, no, na magka-fever, magka-headache, fatigue, o magka-skin rash ang pasyente. Now, what is the mode of transmission of your Lyme disease? If you are bitten by a tick which is infected with or which is carrying the microorganism, no? Pag napaakan ka. Then Leptospira interrogans. So your Leptospira interrogans is the cause of your leptospirosis. Usually, you get leptospirosis if, for example, during baha, and then you know naman, di ba, sa mga canals, ang carrier magunyan is mga rodents, no? So, mangihi ang rodents, pag mangihi ang rodents, apil dito ang ilahang kaning interrogans. So, if meron kang, kumbaga, if you, kunyari, baha, wala ka naka-boots, tapos meron kang, kahit maliit lang na sugat sa paa, so pwede siyang pumasok doon ang Leptospira interrogans, which can cause your leptospirosis. So pwede kang magka-leptospirosis because of that. Kaya bawal mag-ano sa baha, no? Kasi nga, we don't know where this water is coming from, sa canal and everything. It's so dirty. So, all types of bacteria. So, matimingan. So, pwede ka. Okay, so inoculation of skin through contaminated water ang kanyang mode of transmission. And then your Treponema pallidum. So, your causative agent for syphilis. Excuse me, ha. Okay, your Treponema pallidum is the cause of syphilis or a sexually transmitted infection. Now, ang syphilis naman, class, is you can get it through sexual contact or congenital. That's the only mode of transmission. So, through sexual contact or from mother to baby congenital. So, ano sa syphilis? Ang syphilis is not a disease na pag meron ka, mamatay na yun ka, kumbaga. It is a, kumbaga, ano siya? Meron siyang mga stages, no? The first is primary. So, primary stage, it is, magkakaroon ka ng canker, no? Murag hubag. Tapos, pagkahumanan na, it will go to the secondary stage. So, ang primary, painless siya. Walay sakit, no? Tapos, sa secondary stage, magkakaroon ng warts in the moist areas of the body. And then, after the secondary stage, mawala to imong symptoms, it will become latent. So, meaning kay nawala imong symptoms, feeling nimo wala na kay sakit. But that is, kumbaga, that's the time na the bacteria is latent. So, meaning it just stayed in your body, and the latency can go as far as 10, 20 years. And then after that, yun na ang tertiary. So sa tertiary, manggawas na itong mga gamas ka ng dagko kayo na murag ka ng sa mud sa imuhang part sa lawas, no? Sa likod, ana. So, usually people think na wala na ang symptoms, wala na po ang disease. But there are diseases that remains dormant or latent for so long a period na after 20 years, matingalan na lang ka nga, nganong nagkaingon na ka. So kaya, you really have to treat the infection in the primary and secondary stage because it will stay dormant in your body, no? Tapos pag meron ka niyan, you can be a carrier. You can transmit that to other persons through sexual contact. Okay. And this disease is like even in the Bible, this disease is written in the Bible, no, ang syphilis, no? So, nana siya. So, dugay na dyan kay auntie. Now, it's not so common, no? It's not so common now, but I think there are still people who get the disease. But maihap na lang, no? The most common mga sexual infection, sexually transmitted infections, you have your gonorrhea, and ang pinakahadlok if the person gets HIV. Yun ang pinaka medyo jud, hadlok. Okay. So that's for your spirochetes. Tayo niya mag-move. Okay. Now we go to the gram-negative cocci. Okay? So mga gram-negative cocci, so we have Neisseria. Si Neisseria gonorrhea and si Neisseria meningitidis. Your Neisseria gonorrhea is a leading cause of sexually transmitted infection. Now, what is the symptom? Pag sa lalaki, purulent urethritis in male. So meaning, there will be inflammation sa urethra. That is why it will produce a pus, no? So just imagine males, di ba kung mangihi ka, the urine is fluid, di ba? Dili viscous kay water man, di ba? Now with gonorrhea, what will come out is a pus, and that is viscous. So because of the consistency of that, muna nga very painful urination ang ma-feel sa mga lalaki when they have gonorrhea. Now sa mga babae naman, sometimes women do not show symptoms. Pero later it can lead to inflammation sa cervix. So mag-cervicitis. So muna pag swab nimo, magpa-pap smear, no? We call it pap smear. Muna mugawas nga positive for gonorrhea. And there is no other way of transmission except sexual contact. Okay? So moorag yun na siya ang iyahang ang iyang mode of transmission, ang kanang sexual contact for Neisseria gonorrhea. Sa babae lang, when the infection is not treated, it can lead to PID or pelvic inflammatory disease. So, pag nagka-PID ka, it is attributable na you had gonorrhea before and it remained and wala siya na-treat. Kasi wala ka nag-show og symptoms. Yun ang mahirap para sa mga babae, no? Ang mga lalaki, pag nagka-gonorrhea, ay dali kay mabalaan. Ang mga babae ang dili. Kasi most are asymptomatic and only later na magka-PID na and then mono to pag-trace mo oday siya ang hinungdan. Now, Neisseria gonorrhea can also affect newborn infants. We call it neonatorum. I forgot the other name. If a mother na may gonorrheal infection, manganak through normal delivery, the baby, pagawas niya ana sa vaginal canal, pwede siya ng katong bacteria mo adto sa mata sa bata. So, if that happens, the baby might get blind later. So, the protocol, pag normal spontaneous vaginal delivery is ang mata sa baby pagawas, ginabutangan na siya ointment as a prophylaxis. Kaya di man po di mo pwede ingnon ang ikaw daw, ingnon din mo ang mama, ma'am, nagka-gonorrhea ka. Kaya kumingon siya, yes, katuray ang anak ang butangan, dili man na pwede. So meaning lahat, that is a protocol. So, muna siya ang ginabutangan gina sila. No? Kasi nga, pwede magkaroon ang baby because of the ophthalmia neonatorum, I remember. Ophthalmia neonatorum. Segundo, nag-raise ka ng hand, Eileen.
Yes, ma'am.
Any question?
Ma'am, regarding sa pelvic inflammatory disease po, ma'am, di ba late siya malaman sa women?
Oo.
So, in cases na ganyan, ma'am, pag nalaman na siya na meron kang PID, may permanent damage yan, ma'am, or curable yan siya na disease?
Usually, may damage na siya, no? But depende as to the extent, depende kung how long na wala siya na-identify, kung baga. Pero kung magkaingon ana kayo, Ang uban kay kung naay damage dito silang sa ilahang sulod naman siya, like matanggalan sila o kanang itabso mga yun ana gani. Depende. So depende gud siya sa unsa ang ano sa pasyente, case to case basis sa pasyente. No? Kasi nga ano siya, although nago siguro ma-feel na symptoms, but you know women like kasi inside man good siya and you do not usually ang pag naay pain mayon ka ay naay something kay naay pain, but kung walay pain murag i-disregard man good siya. Kaya nga is very dapat jud a yearly check up to know and to rule out para ma-prevent pa ang further damage. Pero pag ingon ana depende as to how kumbaga unsa kadako na ang damage and what can be done with that damage. So naagya ko'y maapektuhan. Depende. No?
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Sige. Okay. So, okay, we go to the next one, your Neisseria meningitidis. So, your Neisseria meningitidis is person-to-person contact, respiratory droplets. It can cause meningitis. So, meningitis is the inflammation of the meninges of the brain. Now, this is a life-threatening infection. No? Kasi yung meninges ng brain mo nag-inflame and supposedly the meninges of the brain is the one that will protect the brain from kasi the skull, next to the skull is the meninges and then the brain. So para siya yung protection. So pag siya nag-inflame, it can no longer protect the brain. No? So pwedeng So kaya nga life-threatening siya. No? So purulent meningitis. So magkakaroon ng intravascular coagulation and shock, no, which is life-threatening and fatal. Okay, so that's your meningitis. Ito, gram-negative rats. So dughan sila, no? First is your Bordetella pertussis, the causative agent of your whooping cough. So whooping cough, wala na siya karon because that is also part of the DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus vaccination. And I think all of you have undergone that vaccination, no? DPT. So you can seldom see. Siguro makakita lang kag tao na naay whooping cough kung katong sa bukid na gyud na wala ni agi og vaccination, no? Na timingan. So mo na siya ang Bordetella pertussis. Okay. Then E. coli. So si E. coli. So Escherichia coli. So the name Escherichia comes from the person who discovered this, Fyodor Escherich, kaya nga Escherichia coli. So it is transmitted through ingestion. Kasi nga, but remember, it is the E. coli is also a part of our normal flora sa GIT. No? Naa siya sa GIT, kaya a part of the normal flora. Kaya lang sometimes, pag mugay na siya, mutaas kumbaga ang mga good bacteria maapektuhan mo na nga mugawas na sila nga mga infection. So what will the person experience with E. coli infection is diarrhea with mucus, no? Now normally this E. coli live in the intestine of healthy people and animals. So meron lang strain na very infective, your E. coli O157H7. No, you can search for that. So E. coli O157H7. Now this type or this strain of E. coli can cause severe abdominal cramps, bloody diarrhea, and vomiting. Now, ang diarrhea per se, wala yung mamatay sa diarrhea per se. Kumbaga, diarrhea lang yun. But people die from the complication. Because pag mag-diarrhea ka, so ang you can die from dehydration. Diba? Or kung magkaroon ka ng bloody diarrhea and so you can die from that, bloody diarrhea, no? So you die from the complication, not from the diarrhea itself. Now, you may be exposed to the E. coli through eating of contaminated food or drinking contaminated water, especially raw vegetables. So that's why we have to wash thoroughly the vegetables that we would like to eat. Kuno ka ng mga kinilaw o mga ganyan. Or undercooked ground beef. No? So there were instances in the US na nagkaroon ng E. coli infection because of undercooked ground beef. Now, healthy adults recover from infection within a week. But young children and older adults have a greater risk of developing life-threatening form of kidney failure. So ang iyahang pinaka-worst na tawag anina kaning side effect no is the kidney failure from hemolytic uremic syndrome. No? So mo na siya sa E. coli. Then we have Francisella tularensis, the cause of your tularemia. No? Tularemia. Now, this disease is zoonosis, meaning you get it from animals, zoonotic infection. So, usually tularemia is the disease of, primarily disease of rabbits. Rabbits na na-transmit to humans. Kaya we know, diba, humans are fan of rabbits. So, kung ang rabbit na isakit, pwede siya matransmit sa humans. So that is your tularemia, no? Zoonotic. So arthropod bite, inoculation into skin, lesions, inhalation or ingestion. So that is why if you have mga pets, kailangan malinis. So my vector, ang Francisella tularensis, ticks. Mga ticks ang kanyang vector. Okay. Then Helicobacter pylori. Now, Helicobacter pylori is the cause of ulcer, peptic ulcer. Noon, sinasabi na ang ulcer is just caused by increased acid in the stomach, but later it was really found out and established that a specific bacteria, which is your Helicobacter pylori, is the causative agent of your peptic ulcer. No? So, yun, na-prove na talaga. So, person to person, fecal-oral route. No? So, fecal-oral route, what comes out from the anus goes into the mouth, so that's fecal-oral route. So that is your Helicobacter pylori. It can also cause gastritis, no? A minor form gastritis, but pag dili siya ma-treat, it will lead to ulcer, peptic ulcer. And then another one is your Legionella pneumophila. So Legionella pneumophila, so infectious aerosols from contaminated water ang iyahang route of transmission. Now, the disease is called Legionnaire's disease. Nganong ingon ani man siya Legionnaire's disease? Because there was a, how come it was named as this? Because there was one time na parang may convention of mga legion. It was a legion, mga veterans ata yon, mga tigulang. And then, in one room sila, and then the air conditioning system of that area, no, dito ni agi itong, kasi nga, aerosols from contaminated water, so doon dumaan. So people in that convention, in that room, marami ang nagkaroon ng sakit.
Centimeter paamuan.
Kaya tinawag siyang Legionnaire's disease. No, Legionnaire's disease. So, fever-like or flu-like illness siya, no? Legionnaire's disease. Or we call it also Pontiac fever, another term for that, Pontiac fever, that's Legionnaire's disease. Next is Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So, Pseudomonas is an opportunistic infection. Usually, that affects the wounds, no? Lalo yung mga may catheters or even lung infection. So, the infection is, what is the, it can cause skin infections, urinary tract infections, ear, eye, and pulmonary infection of cystic fibrosis. Now, how will you know if a wound is infected with Pseudomonas? It has a specific odor. Sweet or grape, grape ang iyahang grapes, you know, sweet or grape ang iyahang smell sa disease. Just imagine, ang samad, yun na ang iyahang kanang smell. So, that is a probability na Pseudomonas infection. And then, ang imuhang samad, magkaroon ng blue-green pigment. No? Kanang samad na bluish or greenish in color. So, suspect ka nga Pseudomonas na siya. Why? Nga nung mag-ingon ana ang color? Because the bacteria is producing a dye, no? Pyocyanin, which is blue ang color sa pyocyanin. Pag green naman, pyoverdine. So, whichever ang iyang i-produce ana or kanang duha ba yung i-produce, so muna blue-green ang color sa imuhang wound. pigment siya, pigment, no? I mean, pigment, no? Dye, yung i-produce. Now, the disease that can be caused by Pseudomonas, pwede din siyang pneumonia, besides sa katungkuan, katong sa wound, sepsis, if from the wound, tapos dili mo matreat, so the bacteria goes to the circulation. And otitis media. Okay, so pwede siyang mag-cause ana. And pwede siyang mag-cause ng nosocomial infections. So when we say nosocomial infections, these are infections acquired from the hospital. So persons na hospitalized and then ang ilang immune system is not really good kasi nga na-hospitalized, pwede siya magkaroon ng Pseudomonas na infection, no? Lalo na pag may wound, like diabetic patients, no? They are very prone to this one. Okay. Then your Shigella dysenteriae. So, kasi species yan siya dyan, so pwede siya mag-cause ng dysentery. So, ang dysentery naman is an intestinal, what happens in dysentery? There is intestinal inflammation. So, mag-inflame ang intestine. Usually, it is the colon, primarily the colon that is inflamed. Now, it can lead to mild or severe stomach cramps kasi nga nag-inflame siya, and severe diarrhea. Tapos, the diarrhea is with mucus or blood in the feces. So, pag libang nimo na ay diarrhea, na ay mucus, na ay blood, no, sa feces. Now, without adequate hydration, it can be fatal. Kasi nga, magsige na, diarrhea, sabi ko nga, you do not die from diarrhea per se, but from the complications. So, it can lead to dehydration, which can be fatal. Okay? So, that is your dysentery. So, other symptoms of Shigella infection includes fever, abdominal pain, and a feeling of incomplete defecation. So, nagdiarrhea na ka, feeling nimo na apag yung kay gusto ilibang. So, incomplete defecation. So, that's part of the symptoms. Okay. Then, your Vibrio cholerae. So, ang characteristic ng Vibrio cholerae infection is watery stools, rice watery stools. So, still, doon siya sa ingestion of contaminated food or water. So, severe watery diarrhea. Now, cholera, there was an outbreak of cholera I think in China in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken with the year. So, there was one area there na nagkaroon ng diarrhea. And during those times, ang hygiene sa mga tao is not that good. So, grabe ang, kumbaga, halos natakdan kay ngano. Ang ilahang patay, ilahalang lubong nila near sa katong river. And then, ang katong river is the source of their drinking water. So, dito sila nagakuha og water, but then, ibabaw ana, dito nila gilubong, and then, muagas mo gina. If there is body of water, man gina siya, muagas. So, people get sick. And people die from severe dehydration. Grabe, severe dehydration yun. Excuse. And cholera infection, pag malibang ang pasyente, mura siya nangihi. Ingon anak ka watery. Mura bag water nilang ihang ilibang. So, that can lead to severe dehydration, and that is fatal. Now, why? Because the Vibrio cholerae produce a toxin, your choleragen toxin. So, because of unsa man ang ani nga toxin? Kani nga toxin will stimulate your adenylate cyclase, which increase the gastrointestinal fluid. So, mao na nga paglibang nimo, watery imong stools. So, that is your Vibrio cholerae. And the last of the gram-negative rad is your Yersinia pestis. So, ang inyong Yersinia pestis, that is the cause of your bubonic plague and pneumonic plague. Okay. And also, dili lang, bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic plague. So, tatlo ang disease na makos ni Yersinia pestis. So, it is a zoonotic infection. Ang reservoir niya is rodents. Rodents and other animals. So, ang humans can be considered victims when they are bitten by the rodent fleas, rodent fleas ha. So, ang rodent na i-bite siya sa fleas, tapos ikaw i-bite ka sa katong, ang flea mo bite sa rodent, i-bite ka sa fleas, so muna nga maay transmission. So sometimes, rarely inhale airborne bacteria from patients who cough having the disease or from infected animals. So there was a time when there was this bubonic plague, no? I think it was in the 18th century. 18th pa or 19th century. So there was this bubonic plague, no? Oh, but ngayon seldom, no? Or wala na, di ba? So that is with your gram-negative rats. Any question, clarification? Wala? Okay, sige. So we go to acid-fast. So the third type of bacteria is your acid-fast. Diba? We have gram-positive, gram-negative. Now, what makes an acid-fast bacteria different from those two? Gram-positive, gram-negative. Ang acid-fast bacteria, meron siyang thin peptidoglycan layer. But, meron din siyang mycolic acid. So, the mycolic acid covers the thin. So, the peptidoglycan layer is being covered by a mycolic acid. Now, this mycolic acid is what makes it different from the other two types, the positive and the negative. And meron siyang phospholipid bilayer with proteins. It is also permeability barrier niya is selective. No? So, selective din. And molecules can penetrate the acid-fast bacterial cell wall through diffusion, osmosis, or the transport system. Okay. So, the most common and the most prominent acid-fast bacilli or bacteria is your Mycobacterium species. No, we have the leprae and the tuberculosis. Now, the Mycobacterium leprae is the causative agent of your leprosy, which is also known as Arundella. What is the other name for leprosy? What is the other term for leprosy? Ha? Pinsa pa ba akong
Ma'am,
Ano? What is the other term for leprosy as a disease?
leprosy.
Other term.
Hansen's disease, ma'am.
Okay. So Hansen's disease, no? So leprosy or Hansen's disease. So that is the disease caused by your Mycobacterium leprae. Now the transmission is inhalation or direct contact with the infected person. Now before, in the Philippines, leprosy was so common that people with leprosy are sent to, you know where? Kabalo mo asa, gipadala ang mga tao nga nagka-leprosy sa una during the after the World War II? Anybody who would like to guess? Asa man?
Jail.
Separate island, ma'am.
Oh, what is the name of the island?
Palawan.
Yes, that's true. Palawan. What? Palawan is the destination of the people with leprosy before.
Seryoso?
Yeah, you can read that in the history.
So, ma'am,
Padala sila dito. Isa ka island kasi, murabag ang island is, isa ka island, dito sila tanan, so they cannot go out from that island. So, dito sila parang, gitapok. Kasi wala pa mang cure noon. Wala pa man yung gamot na Dapsone. So, para hindi sila maka-infect, gi-separate sila from the society itself. But that was before. Alam mo, wala na Wala na to. Then yung mga to Palawan. But that is, you can read, no? They were sent to Palawan. That's the place. Okay?
ma'am, they were sent to Palawan, right?
Yes.
So they basically got a vacation.
Not necessarily, but they were sent there so that they cannot be with the community, so that they can stop the transmission, since drugs for leprosy during those time were not yet that available lalo na in the Philippines, no? So yun, kasi at saka there was a stigma na kasi pag may leprosy ka, people would look at you as, you know, the stigma ba. So doon sila pinapadala para they will not feel na syempre, because if a person do not really know, like they do not understand na ganito yung disease, even now kahit sa COVID ngayon, di ba, may mga tao na grabe yung reaction without really sobra na ba, no? Feel stigmatized yung mga patients. So yung parang ganun. So yun ang ginawa ng government noon. They were sent to that area. Okay? Then we have Mycobacterium tuberculosis. No, si Mycobacterium tuberculosis very common, no? So do you agree that each of us has the Mycobacterium bacilli? Do you agree? Hala, wa na'y naningog. Hala, wala. What do you think? Pulyado? Do you agree that each of us has the Mycobacterium bacilli?
Ma'am?
Do you agree na lahat tayo have the Mycobacterium tuberculosis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, kasi nga, excuse me, meron tayo. Kaya lang, we do not get sick because our immune system is good. But if our immune system is not that good, then we get sick. Okay? So, ano itong Mycobacterium tuberculosis? It is person-to-person transmission through respiratory aerosols. So, TB. So, usually TB. So, tuberculosis. So, the other name for TB is pinsoy. 2D nga pinsoy. What is if leprosy is Hansen's, ano naman si tuberculosis? Mr. Pinsoy?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, what's the other name for tuberculosis?
Ano ka ba naman?
Okay,
White
sir,
plague.
who wants to help Pinsoy? Turtal. What's the other name for tuberculosis? Wala. Any volunteer?
Ano, ma'am?
Ano yan?
Ano, ma'am?
Okay, Mr. Hindi mo ko makita. Ha?
The White Plague, ma'am.
Si ano?
The White Plague.
No?
Ma'am?
Yes, sino? Ay, paano ba?
Segundo, ma'am.
Segundo. Di ko na ako makita ang nag-speak. O, sige, segundo. Sorry, ha?
The King's Touch, ma'am.
The King's Touch? No.
Ma'am.
Ah?
Hello.
Sino?
Hello.
Ma'am.
Si?
Thesis.
Anong
Diabetes.
ano mo?
No, ma'am.
What's your answer?
Thesis, ma'am. Thesis.
No?
Hello, ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes?
Hello, Lim. Koch disease.
Okay. So, Koch's disease. That's the other name for TB. Halak ka. Si Robert Koch gani, di ba? So, that's Koch's disease. So, kung naamo sa butika, lain kung kayo, no, kung naamoy pasyente nag-TB, pwede man kami ngon, ay, Koch's disease. Mga anak ba? Another term so that dili po kasi di ba pag na-TB apoy stigma ang mga tao tibihon man na siya mga anak. So as pharmacists, do not show that with your patients or your customers. Okay? So the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, pwede siyang the most common is pulmonary TB. So, pag sinabing pulmonary TB, the bacteria is in the pulmonary area. But this type of TB, if not treated, hindi mo siya gitreat kasi ang TB is a very slow-growing disease. Unlike other disease, kunyari pneumonia, pag dili mo tambalan ng pasyente, pwede mamatay in 1 to 2 weeks. Ang TB, nagka-TB siya. I-treat mo siya, tapos hindi niya tapusin yung treatment, tigya po na siya mamatay. Later, the disease will return. So, ingon ana ang pwede mahitabo. So, very slow growing na disease na siya. Kumbaga, very mo siya ka ng turtle ba? So, usually it starts with pulmonary TB. But if the disease is not treated, it can go to extrapulmonary TB. So that is when the TB or the bacteria goes outside of the pulmonary area. It can go to the bones. So you have TB of the bones. No? Or meron nga TB of the brain. Niadto sa brain ang bacteria, niadto sa bone. So they become extrapulmonary. Pag extrapulmonary, that is very hard to treat. So wala na gyud ang pasyente. And the usual problem also with TB treatment is the resistance. If ang daming multi-drug resistant TB patients tayo, if these patients, they do not respond to the normal therapy of tuberculosis. So pag hindi ka na mag-respond yan, I don't know what will be used for you na. Mabuti na lang ngayon, we have oral medications for TB. Kaya lang, ang dami mong inumin. May paracetamide, may rifampicin, may ethambutol, may INH. Depende no kung how long will you take that. Depende kasi yan siya. Noon, do you know that to treat TB, you have to be injected with an aminoglycoside. That is your streptomycin. Imagine being injected every day for the course of 3 months. Puli-puli na lang na. Right, left arm, then sa lubot. No? So ngayon, kaya lang ang tao, ang hirap pa inumin. Libre, that's one of the government, but then, so, kaya problema pa rin yan, TB, no? That is still a public health problem in the Philippines because people do not really know the depth of the effect of this TB. Okay? Pag magkaroon na siya ng, tawag nito, the extrapulmonary. Now, with regards to TB, the first vaccination that an infant gets is BCG, and that is for against TB. So, pagkaanak sa baby, pwede dayon siya injectionan o BCG vaccine. That is Bacillus calmette-guerin vaccine, and that is for TB. So, that's the first immunization na ma-receive sa bata. Right after birth. The following day or kung buntag sa hapon, pwede na silang matagaan. Okay. Now, there are other mycobacterium infections. Like we have Mycobacterium avium, no? But this type of Mycobacterium, we usually people with competent kanang immune system do not get it, but people with immunocompetent immune system, like those with AIDS, the type of tuberculosis that they get is not the Mycobacterium tuberculosis causative agent, but the Mycobacterium avium. So sa mga AIDS patients, so lahi pud tong ilaha, no? So kana lang mga immunocompromised kasi nga kung okay immune system mo, o dili ka man magkasakit, but if your immune system is low, pwede kang magkasakit anytime. Okay. Then we go to the unique bacteria. So there are 3 species that are included in the unique bacteria. So we have the chlamydia, the mycoplasma, and the rickettsia rickettsiae. So the chlamydia. So the chlamydia, we have the chlamydia trachomatis. So sexual contact ang kayang route of transmission, or pwedeng fomite. So it can cause your trachoma, neonatal conjunctivitis, but if it is sexual contact, it can cause diseases of the genitourinary tract. So pwede siya mag-cause ng urethritis, so inflammation of the urethra. Pwede siya mag-cause ng cervicitis. So ang urethritis pwede sa male, female. Ang cervicitis naman sa babae, inflammation of the cervix, salpingitis, inflammation of the fallopian tubes, So kung ingon ana gani, ang bacteria gikan sa cervix, nisaka siya. So the next niya nga sakaan is the fallopian tubes, muna na ang salpingitis. So ang infection is nag-deeper na, dito na siya sa sulod, no, sa genital area. And lymphogranuloma venereum. So these are just the diseases that can be caused by your chlamydia trachomatis. No? Then Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So ang Mycoplasma pneumoniae, wala siya. Anong wala nga si Mycoplasma? Yung kanina sinabi natin. It is a prokaryotic cell, pero you still remember the difference of the eukaryotic and the prokaryotic? Ano ang meron si Mycoplasma na wala sa ibang?
Spheros, ma'am.
Zeros ba yun? O basta i-remember nyo yun ha. And then, so it can cause ang mode of transmission, inhalation of droplets. And atypical pneumonia. Yun yung si atypical, not so common, no? Mura siya ka ng, walking pneumonia, gani ilang the not so common pneumonia. No? And Rickettsia rickettsiae, the cause of your Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So Rickettsia rickettsiae is spread through the bite of ticks, tick bite. So, and it can cause your Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Okay. So those are just some of the unique bacteria that I have included. I think it's 3 o'clock. Do you want to have a break?
Yes,
Stop share muna ha.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in my it's 3:09. So let's be back at 3:20. At 3:10 na siya. So 3:20. 10 minutes break lang, okay? Sige. Okay, you can have your break now. Okay, it's already 3:21. So I hope you are already back. Gamit lang ko aning kemes, okay. So 165, asa nang uban?
Hello,
Ano ba?
ma'am.
Yes?
Nag-message ako sa'yo, ma'am. May question pa sana ako sa'yo.
O, lagi, sorry. Daghan, you know, while explaining, I cannot read the chat. So, daghan na day kayong message. Sige lang, kay ma-record man ni siya, no? Okay lang. Last na yung... Ganihara ka nag-message ga?
Wait. While
Bagundang.
discussion po, ma'am.
Bagundang. I will try to see your message. To wash the wound, okay man ang antiseptic. But if it is punctured wound, mo't akong giingon na, better ang hydrogen peroxide. Pag punctured wound. But if it's just a normal type of wound, the other antiseptics like betadine is okay lang. Okay. Does that
Another
answer?
question, ma'am, about sa
Yes.
TB po. I heard that TB, ma'am, it's not really namamatay, but magiging, kumbaga, inactivated. Is that correct?
Yes, kasi nga sabi ko, each of us has the tubercle bacilli. So, we will only get sick from that bacteria if our immune system is low. So when you try to take the antibiotics, it will kill the bacteria, but still, kumbaga, it will just lower down, pero not necessarily mawala dito sa immune system. Just like when you have a viral infection, but I will discuss that later, no, na you are treated from the viral infection, but in reality, the virus is still in your system. So it can be, pwede siyang ma-reactivate. Yung ganyan.
I was thinking, ma'am, na it's like HIV, parang ganyan yung na-i-inactivate lang siya. Not necessarily namamatay, pero na giging inactivated lang po.
Iba naman yung sa HIV because ang HIV is a viral infection which is not self-limiting. Because most viral infections are self-limiting, but with HIV, it is not. That is why it stays in you it stays in the person until that person dies. So yung sa TB naman, because of kasi nga airborne siya I mean, aerosol droplet siya. So from the air that we breathe, we can have the bacilli. Kaya lang, it will remain inactive as long as our immune system is not compromised. So yun lang.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay na po.
Okay. Sige. So we will continue. Pa ba mo natulog diha? Kasi katulogo na mo ha? Okay.
Alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic.
Dapat jud. Ito. Di ko kabalo sa ni pagka ng highlight sa magstorya ba sa ipindot ani, ma'am. Di mo kabalo ani, oy. Ay, ambot yung saon ni. Di na lang yun. Sige. So, we are done with the prokaryotes. So, we are now moving into the eukaryotic microorganism. Okay, so eukaryotes, so we have differentiated eukaryotes from prokaryotes before. But to discuss it again, so ang eukaryotes naman are multicellular organisms. So multicellular, they have a true nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles, and it divides by mitosis. So tayo as human beings, our cells are eukaryotic in nature. Okay, the first eukaryotic organism that we're going to discuss is the fungi. Okay, so mga fungi. Okay. So now the fungi, with regards to its cell wall, if the bacteria is made up of peptidoglycan, your fungal cell wall is made up of chitin or chitin, no? So either way you pronounce it. So this chitin or chitin are potent antigens. Now, meron din siyang cell membrane ang fungi, which is made up of ergosterol. So this is a type of sterol, no? Then, merong dalawang klase na fungi. So, molds and the yeast. So, in our modern world, organ transplantation and modern, saan ba yun? Another thing pala, fungi lacks chlorophyll, so they cannot generate energy through photosynthesis. Ang fungi, although they are eukaryotic in nature, and they require aerobic environment. So, ang cell membrane nila is bilayered. Even, sabi natin, meron siyang ergosterol, but it is bilayered. And the innermost layer around the fungal cytoplasm, nandun yung ergosterol. Now, ergosterol is the target of most antifungal drugs. So, ang mga antifungal drugs, ang kanyang mechanism of action is to destroy that ergosterol in the fungal cell wall. Now, it is hard to treat a fungal infection. If a bacterial infection, usually, painumun ka sa doctor of 7 days, di ba? 1 week of that antibiotic to really kill the bacteria. In fungal infection, it will take 4 weeks to 6 weeks. So matagal. At saka it is, one thing that makes it difficult is that kasi eukaryotic siya in nature and our also cell is also eukaryotic. So kaya ang fungal infection medyo mahirap siya longer to treat, no? Longer to treat. So this so the cell wall, since it's made up of chitin, it surrounds the cell membrane, the carbohydrate. So sabi ko nga, potent antigen siya to the human immune system, yung kanyang chitin. Meron siyang capsule, which is made up of polysaccharide coating surrounding the cell wall. And it is the antiphagocytic virulence, no? So, may dalawa siya, yeast and molds. The yeast is considered to be unicellular. So, it reproduces by budding. So, mura bag na imutubo and then mahulog lang. So, budding. When buds do not separate, they form long chains and usually reproduce slower than bacteria. Yung molds naman is multicellular. So, yun ang difference nila. And fungi are obligate aerobes. So, ano ibig sabihin nan? They need oxygen to survive kasi obligate aerobes, most of them. And they are saprophytes. So, pag sinabing saprophytes, they live and utilize organic matter as an energy source. So, where do they get this organic matter? From the soil. That is why most fungi are found in the soil or in rotten vegetation. Di ba, like, ang food, even as a ref, di ba, ay nagkaroon og molds. And this molds is a type of fungi. Now, have you ever imagined ang atuang mga basura, di ba? Mga biodegradable, kanang the peelings of fruits, vegetables, or anything na kanang biodegradable. When we throw that, di ba, dapat i-separate siya from plastics and papers and katong mga food, na mga waste food. So when, kunyari, is itapon mo siya doon sa isang lugar, later on, when you come back, wala na siya. Nag-decompose na siya. Or kahit yung dahon ng trees, no, that fall off from the trees, lalo na kung sa forest, wala may nanilhig sa forest, pero nga nung wala man na siya nidaghan, because it is the fungi that eats this, that decomposes rather this, kaning mga leftovers, no, or mga peelings of the biodegradable things that we have. So fungi in nature is helping us to maintain this kind of world that we have now, except that there are only a few pathogenic fungi. But in totality, fungi is very useful to human survival. Kaya kung wala ang fungi, wala tayo mga mag-decompose sa ato ang mga basura, no? And just imagine a world na ay basura na wala na decompose. Okay. So that's your fungi. So meron siyang mycelium, sinasabi ang fungi. So it is an intertwining structure composed of tubular filaments. So this is your mycelium, oh. So yan. Below ground mycelium. So intertwining structure composed of tubular filaments ang mycelium. Or the hyphae, o hyphae. So ito siya. Now, the vegetative portion of this one is your thallus, and the reproductive part is the aerial, no? So ito siya. So ang hypha, this one here, if we're going to magnify it, so ito siya, no? So this is what we can see. May nucleus siya, may septum, ganun. Now, the spores involved in sexual reproduction of fungi. So these are just go over just to include lang. So we have basidiospores, ascospores, zygospores, oospores. So this one is enclosed in a club-shaped basidium. That is why it is called basidiospores. Pag enclosed in an ascospores. So fusion of two identical cells from the same hyphae, zygote, and from different is oospores. So just for ano lang yan siya. Additional info. Now we go to the importance in the medical field of this fungi. Now fungi causes infection, which we call mycosis. No, so this is the type of infection that a fungi will cause in a person, human person. Now there are 5 types of mycosis. Excuse. Superficial, cutaneous, subcutaneous, systemic, and opportunistic. And we're going to know what are the different fungi that can cause this type of mycosis. So the first is your superficial. So superficial, so this is the mycosis, and this is the specific fungi, no, that causes this type of infection. So pag sinabi natin superficial, so number 1 is we have the Pityriasis versicolor, the Tinea nigra, the white piedra, and the black piedra. So the Malassezi species, okay, can also cause this versicolor, no? Versicolor. Pwede rin siya tawaging Tinea versicolor or Pityriasis versicolor. So usually, how to identify if that is a fungal infection? You do scrapings on the part, and you use potassium hydroxide, no, to test the scrapings if it is really fungal infection or not. No, ang cause niyang Tinea versicolor, from the term, there is uneven pigmentation. So kanang usually makita ninyo na ay gi-up, no, uneven pigmentation, so na area na lighter in shade. No? And then pag dili nimo siya tambalan, mudaghan siya. So that is Tinea versicolor. Then another is your napo kay Tinea nigra. So ang Tinea nigra is black colored pigmentation, no? So usually sa soles of the hand and feet. So it affects, so caused by Horta wernickeyi. So black colored pigmentation of the sole of the hands and feet. So that is your Tinea nigra. Then we have your white piedra. Yung white piedra mo naman is the Trichosporon species ang mag-cause niyan. So that is your light brown nodules on bird, no? Tapos ang black piedra is brown black crust outside the hair shaft. So yun lang. Do not worry, I will give you the additional notes, no, which I am reading for you. Okay. So yun siya superficial, so meaning very sa surface lang talaga ng skin, no? So on the outermost layer of the skin, that is your superficial mycosis. And most common of this species is the Trichosporon, no? Muna siya ang pinaka-common na mag-cause ng fungal infection na superficial. Then we go to the cutaneous. So cutaneous, so ito siya, no? So ito siya. So let's go to the next na lang na slides. So superficial, as I've mentioned, no cellular response by the host. Kasi nga is on the very outermost layer of the skin. Next to that one is the cutaneous. So ang cutaneous infection is caused by tinea, mga tinea na mga species, no? Tinea infections caused by dermatophytes. Now, ang dermatophytosis is a category of cutaneous fungal infections caused by more than 30 species of fungi, and they live in the horny layer of the skin, the nails, and the hair. So, yan sila. And dermatophytes secrete keratinase. So, keratinase is an enzyme that digests keratin. So, kaya sa nails, if it infects the nails, it will digest the keratin portion of the nails. So, it will manifest as scaling of the skin or loss of hair or crumbling of the nails. Kapag imong nails mag-crumble, di ba? Makita mo anang uban usahay sa ilang mga nails, no? So, that is your cutaneous infections caused by dermatophytes. So, pag ang microsporon siya na species, so under tayo sa cutaneous, pag microsporon species, usually it causes infection of the skin and hair. Pag epidermophyton naman, skin and nails. Pag trichophyton, lahat na, skin, hair, and nails. Okay. So we go to specific, your tinea infections, Tinea corporis. So this is the causative agent of your ringworm sa body, no? Tinea corporis. So, ringworm. The fungi spread, forming a ring shape with a red raised border, which represent areas of active inflammation with a healing center. So, sa body siya. Pag Tinea crucis naman, sa groin, which causes your Jack's itch. Red patches in the groin and scrotum. So, this is more common sa mga lalaki, no? The Jack's itch, caused by Tinea crucis. Cruris. Tinea pedis, by the name pedis, it causes athlete's foot. So, dito sa tiil. Between sa toes, no? So, unsa may mahitabo, there is cracking and peeling of the skin in between the toes. And usually, this is because warmth and moisture. So, kung kanang, ang uban man good, like, dapat you dry your feet very well before you place on your socks and wear your shoes. Ang uban, maskin basa, musuot, so, or dili mag-ilis og medyas, o kana pod. So, because of that, magkaroon siya, kung ana man good, na ay moist. So, kung na ay moist, ganahan mo puyo dito si Tinea pedis. So, muna magka-cause og athlete's foot. No? And capitis, Tinea capitis, pag sa scalp. So, common in children. No? These are common in children. So, red lesions with loss of hair, so mawala ang hair sa itong portion nga na lesion. Then, Tinea unguium, so that is on the nails. No? What happens? The nails will thicken, ma-discolored, and becomes brittle. So, that's what happened with your Tinea unguium. Okay. So, then they have the Candida albicans. So, ang Candida albicans is the causative agent of your oral thrush, no? Sa mouth. Kanang ginaingon nilang, sa Bisaya, luas, no? Thrush, no? So, it is a creamy white exudate with a reddish base cover. So, muna siya diya sa mouth, oral thrush. Then, pwede rin siya mag-cause na infection sa diaper area, sa groin. So, kanang diaper rash, no? Sa groin area, lalo na sa mga bata. Then, it can also, meron tayong Candida vaginitis, which is specific to the infection to the vagina, no? So, inflammation of that area. So, kaya vaginitis, no? Caused by that. Now, ang Candida albicans naman, pwede siyang mag-cause ng opportunistic systemic infections. So, if the person's immune system is not that good, so pwede siyang magkaroon ka ng opportunistic systemic infection by the Candida albicans. Kasi nga, this Candida albicans is normal, is part of the normal flora. So, na-adjud siya. Pag sinabi natin normal flora, you cannot eliminate it kasi it's part of the body. Like sa skin ba siya? Pero, in a number that is not high enough to cause infection. only pag tumaas yung number nila kasi nga yung immune system mo nag-low down, yun sila. Opportunistic, meaning mangita lang sila og time kung asa sila pwede mag-infect, no? So they are like that. So mga very opportunistic. So those are your cutaneous fungal cutaneous mycosis. Then we have systemic. So sa systemic, we have Cryptococcus neoformans. By the way, sa inyuhang notes, ang fungi diha gi-isa lang manggod nila. So this one divide into the type of mycosis that they cause. So ang systemic, by the name systemic, so system na ang involved. So we have Cryptococcus neoformans or GATI. So you can get it from pigeon droppings. So pigeon is a type of birds, no? So it can cause meningitis. So pigeon, lalo na pag okay lang kung ikaw siguro sa imuhang pigeon, pero minsan mahirap din, no? So ang nangyayari dito sa systemic mycosis, still natural habitat nila ang soil. Kaya lang if this is inhaled by humans, so yun, nagkakaroon ng tawag nito ng infection yung human being. Now, meron pang iba sa systemic besides sa yung mga blasto, histo, and cocci na mga type na species, no? So, pwede rin siya magkaroon ng infection, systemic mycosis. And then another one is your Aspergillus species. So example of this is your Fumigatus. This is the most common human pathogen, no? Fungal human pathogen. Now, how do you get this infection? By inhaling the spores of the fungi, no? And if a person inhale the spores, pwede siya magkaroon ng 3 major diseases, type of diseases. So, allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, aspergilloma, and invasive aspergillosis. So these are the 3 types, no? Now, persons with lung cavitations from TB, so kunyari ang pasyente nagkaroon ng TB or any malignancy, no, involving the respiratory, so they are more high risk to this type of fungal infection sa Aspergillus. So, kaya, tawag nito, you have to be very careful. Because if you get this, tapos meron ka ng cavitations from TB or meron kang malignancies, now, magkakaroon ng high risk ka, and then the fungi will grow inside and it becomes like a fungal ball, no? Mura siya bola na muda, kung ka pa tanawon. So, fungal ball as big as a golf ball. And the only thing to do that is to remove that, no? Removal of that from the area, no? Kung asa siya nagtubo. So, mauna siya. And also, people with, tawag nito, compromised immune system are very prone to fungal infections. Now, your Aspergillus produces a toxin, no? And this toxin is the one that is contributory to its virulence. No? Ang mycotoxin. Then we have opportunistic. So nibalik diri si Candida albicans, di ba? Yung taganiha nga opportunistic kayo si Candida albicans. So Candida albicans causes cutaneous infection as well as invasive systemic infection. If you do not treat the cutaneous infection, it will become invasive, no? And ito ang medyo mahirap na siya i-treat pag invasive systemic infection kasi it involves na the organs in the body. So that is your Candida albicans. Now, how does it become systemic ang iyang infection? Kasi pag it will become disseminated. And pag na-disseminate mo yung fungi rather, it goes into the bloodstream. So pag nandun na siya sa bloodstream, since it circulates, so it can go to any organ in the body. So it can go to the retina of the eye, so anywhere. So yun ang medyo mahirap. So from a simple cutaneous infection, nag-disseminate siya, pumasok siya sa bloodstream, then it moves around in the body. And you have your Pneumocystis jirovecii. Now, the previous name of this fungi is Pneumocystis carinii, but it was changed to jirovecii. Now, this is the most common opportunistic infection in persons with HIV. So, this is the cause of pneumonia for patients with HIV. So, dili sila matakdan o katong mga, pwede man sila, but this is the most common na cause of pneumonia in patients na HIV, yung mga immunocompromised. No? So, kumbaga, kasi nga, di ba, their immune system is not that well. So, kasi nga, this type of fungi do not really cause disease, no? It's not, kumbaga ba, kung okay immune system, dili ka mahadlok ani. Pero kung ang imuhang immune system is low, mahadlok ka sa ila kay ngano, opportunistic man sila, mangita lang yun sila og kanang time no pwede sila mag-infect. So that is ato ang bantayan sa opportunistic na mga infections, not just like fungi but all other micro infections, no? Okay. So, do you have any questions with fungi before we go to the next eukaryotic cell, your protozoa? Okay. So, ang protozoans is another type of eukaryotic microorganism. So, they are unicellular, non-photosynthetic eukaryotes. And they are divided into, it can be a flagellate, amoebas, ciliates, and sporozoans. With regards to reproduction, dual sila. They can either produce sexually or asexually. So, muna sila. So, ang mga protozoans. Okay. So, if we're going to divide the protozoans, so kasi nga, merong mga, according sa route of transmission ni siya. So, fecal-oral route of transmission, you have Entamoeba histolytica, your Gargia lambdia, your Toxoplasma gondii. And pag sexual transmission, your Trichomonas vaginalis. Pag vector-borne, meaning na ay vector involved, pwedeng mga insects or mga ticks, no? So we have 3. The Plasmodium species, kani-kani diri sila is specific yun siya nga fungi. There is species, so daghan sila, Plasmodium, Trypanosoma, and Leishmania. So we go to the first, the fecal-oral route. So, Entamoeba histolytica. So, very common. So, it causes amoebiasis or your bloody diarrhea. So, how do you get it? If you ingest the cyst of the Entamoeba, usually from contaminated water. So, dili siya sa food. Kasi sa food, we cook it, no? So, mamatay siya. But usually sa water. So, do not drink anywhere kasi nga pwede ka magkaroon ng Entamoeba histolytica infection or amoebiasis. So, it is asymptomatic. Kaya lang, there is colitis, no? So, inflammation of the colon, that is why sa amoebiasis, the person will feel stomach cramps. So, sakit ang tiyan na dili niya ma-explain because nag-inflame ang colon eh. So, colitis. And then, diarrhea. It's not the usual diarrhea kagaya ng mga cholera or the dysentery na mura siya tubig. Ang sa amoebiasis is ano lang, diarrhea na mura ba ka ng less type of diarrhea, not really the nga daghan kag ilibang, but then ang imuhang ilibang is with blood, with mucus, and foul smelling kaayo siya. No? So muna siya sa Entamoeba histolytica. Then we have the Gargia lambdia. So again, these are fecal-oral routes. So you ingest the protozoan. So Gargia lambdia. So ang difference na niya, the same is for fecal-oral route, ingestion. So greasy diarrhea. So acute watery diarrhea with chronic intermittent diarrhea with malabsorption. So, muna siya sa Gargia lambdia. But this is not so common, no? Mo gani pag, some, no, usually, ang uban, ganaingon nila, Gargia lambdia, you can get it from eating raw or kinilaw na mga pagkaon, sabi nila. But there was an instance, no? And then, Toxoplasma gondii. This one, you get it from the feces of cats. So, inhalation and contamination of food. Okay, so usually from animals, no? So, Toxoplasma gondii. So, undercooked. So, how do you get it? Pag contamination of food, ingestion of undercooked meat, or ingestion of the oocysts from contaminated cat feces, no? So, meaning, yung cat feces pwede na, I don't know how it come, na nahalo siguro sa pagkain, ingest mo ganyan, so pwede ka magkaroon ng infection. So, asymptomatic infection, it can cause spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, or severe neonatal disease. So, pag yung pasyente is pregnant, and then it can also cause encephalitis, but ano na yan siya, yung side effects na nyo, but it's more on the asymptomatic infection. Then we have the sexually transmitted protozoal infection. So your Trichomonas vaginalis. So what is Trichomonas vaginalis? So route of transmission is sexual contact kasi nga sexually transmitted. So vaginitis, ang iyahang disease is vaginitis. So what will the patient experience? So there will be painful vaginal itching, burning urination, plus the frothy vaginal discharge. So this is compared to Neisseria gonorrhea. So kani siya, ang discharge is naagid siya discharge, no, foul smelling, frothy discharge. Muna ang patient with this one will really go to the doctor and then consult. Pero katong Neisseria manggod is wala kayo siya symptoms mo na ang patient will disregard it na murag wala lang yun siya sakit, pero in reality na siya. Okay. But among the two is the Neisseria that is most common sexual infection. Okay. Then we have the vector-borne. So kani sila na ay mga vector or na ay mga involved na insects or 8-legged ang uban kay 6 lang insects. So we have 3 species, the Plasmodium, the Trypanosoma, and the Leishmania. Ang Plasmodium species is the one that is causing your malaria. No, malaria. So malaria is a disease that causes high fever. So sa ma-feel sa pasyente, high fever, chills, and muscle pain. How do you get it? If you are bitten by the female Anopheles minimus mosquito. Na ang mosquito nakapaak siya og patient na naay malaria. So siya ron nag-carry na sa malaria and then paakon kaniya, so matransmit niya sa imuha tong sporozoan, the Plasmodium. So muna siya, so only the female Anopheles minimus mosquito. So malaria is very rare in the US. It's more common in Asia, no? In our place, in Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, and South America. The symptoms of malaria may come and go in cycles, but it can produce or it can cause serious problems. So what are these serious problems na pwede niyang i-produce? Damage to the heart, to the lungs, the kidney, and the brain. Pwede rin siya maging deadly, no? So deadly. Now, among the 4 species here, which I have mentioned, the Falciparum, the Vivax, the Ovale, and the Malariae, the most lethal or potentially life-threatening is the Falciparum. So, kani siya sa upat. So, this is the life-threatening. So, patients with severe Falciparum malaria may develop liver and kidney failure. So, muna siya, patients might die from liver and kidney failure. Usually, if you go to forest, mga areas na forested areas, you really have to protect yourself because you do not know what type of mosquitoes are there. So kung mapaakan ka, pwede ka talaga na ma-infect, no? And some are lethal, meaning it will just take 2 days, 3 days, mag full-blown an infection, tapos nagka-liver, liver failure, wala na ang pasyente, nagka-kidney failure, so yun na, magiging cause of death mo, no? So, yun siya ang ano. So, besides the liver and the kidney failure, it can also cause convulsions and coma. So, infections with the Vivax and the Ovale is less serious. No? So the vivax and the ovale are less serious illness. But the parasite can remain dormant in the liver for many months, causing a reappearance of symptoms months or even years later. Kaya pag nagkaroon ka ng malarial infection, yun na nga, it doesn't mean that the protozoan is out in your body. It can remain dormant in your body and it may come out anytime, no? Anytime. Now, the next vector borne is your Trypanosoma species. So, the vector for this is your tsetse fly, no? Tsetse fly. So, muna siya ang vector. We do not have it in the Philippines. So, if you do not have the vector, then you will not have a disease. So, may na lang, Jude. So, meron siyang apat na species, no? So, but the cruci gilahi na ko kasi lahi ko ni siya. So, the rhodesiense, the gambiense, and the brucei, pare-pareho lang ni sila, no? So, they are African trypanosomes or old world trypanosomes. So, kaning tulo, no? Ang imuhang, the gambiense cause the West African sleeping sickness. So, si gambiense na siya, West African sleeping sickness. Si rhodesiense naman is the East African. So, na ay West, na ay East. So, si West, si gambiense, si rhodesiense is the East African sleeping sickness. Si brucei naman is parasite of cattle and occasionally other animals. And it does not infect humans, si brucei. So, kanilang si rhodesiense, si gambiense. So, in Africa. Si crucei naman is known as your Chagas disease or Chagas disease. So, other name is your American. No? Kung kaning duha African, si crucei ang American trypanosomiasis. It is potentially life-threatening illness. No? Si crucei. So, Chagas disease is endemic in 21 continental Latin American countries. Okay, so how do you get it? By transmitted to humans by contact with feces or urine of bugs. So, vector niya is bugs, no? As the kissing bug. Muna siya. Now, usually in other areas, it also, tawag nila is kanang, depende no kung nailay silang laing pangalan sa geographical areas. Now, the Chagas disease or the Trypanosoma cruzi is named after the Carlos Chagas. So, a Brazilian physician and researcher who discovered the disease in 1909, so 101 years ago. So, muna siya, it was named after him. Chagas disease, it's Trypanosoma cruzi. Now, ang imo yung i-remember aning Chagas disease kasi nga sleeping sickness siya. So, if a patient who is infected with this disease will, nga sleeping sickness siya because it is the central nervous system that is affected. So, ang mahitabo ang pasyente ganahan matulog. Pero, it will come a time na pwede siya mag-produce of coma sa pasyente. So, when the patient goes into a coma because of this disease, then that's the end of it. So, mamatay na ang pasyente. So, sa African, so we call it African sleeping sickness, either west or east. So, muna siya. So, natulog lang ang pasyente. So, kung ipasagdan lang, then it goes to the, kasi nga, pag natulog siya, meaning the protozoa is already in the central nervous system. So, pag mag-coma na ang pasyente, yun na. That's the end of it. Okay. The third vector borne is the Leishmania species. Ang Leishmania naman is, meron tayong tatlo. The Tropica, apat pala, Braziliensis, Donovani, and the Cagasi. Now, Leishmaniasis, that is the disease, is a vector-borne disease that is transmitted by sand flies. So, flies naman sa kanila. Tsetse fly, ang Leishmania, sand fly. And they are obligate intracellular protozoa. So, the human infection is caused by, marami rin, 21 of the 30 species. So, ito na nga apat na na-mention ko dito. Okay? So, that is your Leishmaniasis. So, may mga picture na. Usually, may picture nito na bata na the child is bitten doon sa kanyang mukha, then doon nagkaroon ng infection doon sa kanyang mukha. Okay? It's 4 o'clock. Excuse me. You want me to continue or you want me to stop? I am on my, ano ba yun? Sandali. Kapila ba di nga slide ni nako? 55 out of the 100, tas napa ko idugang unya. So, we are now on the acellular, no? And then viruses na, virus and then the prions. So after discussing the viruses and the prions, we will have the discussion of the drugs used for the treatment of this infection. So, ano lang nato siya is, excuse me, by grouping na sa drug. So, dali naman kayo to siya, no, for tomorrow. Okay? So, I think it's already 4 o'clock and I know na listening for 3 hours is not really that healthy. No? So, I hope that you get all the information which I have discussed with you. And I know, but this is just a review. I know you have discussed this in your micro. No? So, just a review, a refresher, kumbaga, kay basig nakalimot. So, that's the idea. Anong mag-review man kay basig nakalimot. No? Nakalimot, kung yung kag nakalimot na discuss, pero kung wag yun na discuss, lahi na po to siya. Di ba? So, I will be class 165 na lang gud ta. And I cannot check the attendance nga, ako lang mag-isa, but you know, it's up to you if you will attend or not. Diba? It's what did I say in marketing? Learning is not, diba? The learning comes from the learners themselves. So, facilitator lang yun ko sa inyong learning. Now, if there are things that you would like to discuss, you can ask me na i-include na to for tomorrow. If na ako'y nalimtan, if na may gusto i-discuss, pwede ninyo i-ingon sa kuha, i-message lang ko ninyo. Tapos, so I will be giving a post-test. So, maghimo pa ko post-test kasi kung asa naman ko na human, 30 items post-test. So, i-upload na yun ako. So, you can see it. Di na ako mag-message basta pag mahuman ako na yung i-upload. Tapos, you have until 12 midnight to answer. Okay. And then, tomorrow naman, another 15. So, ang post-test, 30. Ang pre-test tomorrow is 15 items. So, unsay coverage sa pre-test nga diha ba diri naman ko nagkuha sa kaning kuan. I will sa tables na ko magkuha sa 15 items for tomorrow. Ay 100 ninyo ang pre-test ha. I would expect 100 sa pre-test kay nana diha sa post-test depende kung nag-note mo. Okay? So post-test, pre-test, post-test. So mo na ato ang ano. Sige na po ba yung nga nag-chats dire? COVID. Yes, we will discuss COVID tomorrow as part sa ato ang kaya nga under sa viruses, ang Coronaviridae ang pinakalas na ako na gi-appeal, no? So, COVID, no? Nga no, mostly mga mosquito-related diseases kay ang gina-infect na organ kay liver or kidney. Kasi I think it's in the life cycle of the disease, no? It involves the liver and the kidney. Kasi ang kaninga mga disease, if you try to read the life cycle of this, like your mga malaria, they cannot na ay part sa life cycle sa katong disease nga dapat ilang i-ano sa mosquito. Pag abot nila sa humans, it has to go to the liver to finish that. And usually mo na nga ma-infect ang liver o kidney. So na siya sa life cycle, you read the life cycle. Napa ba ubang chat question? Okay. Wala na ba? Kung na-disconnect mo, just connect again, no? Ano lang. I will leave that to you if you are honest enough and if you are tawag ani kaning if you will listen or not, ay dili jud ko. I mean, naarag yun na sa inyo ha. Dili ko masuko kung di mo maminaw, ay wala ko na sa kuha. Basta naarag yun na sa inyo ha, no? I will just give everything that I can give and it's up to you. Ang notes, I will give it tomorrow after the discussion, no? So, kanang so far 12 pages pa man gud ni akong notes niya, napata sa 8 page. Daghan no. Para gusto kong gihatag sa inyo sa kuan sa pharmaceutical marketing. Ato pod, no? So, do you have any question, clarification? Maghatag ka pa PPT, ma'am. Yes, I will give it after the post-test tomorrow. Mag-post-test at ugma. Sunday na ko ihatag ang PPT. I-send ako sa, asan nyo gusto i-send? Sa Quipper or sa inyong through your precedents? Kaya ang PPT na ako, 100 slides ya. Ang Canva manggod nga free, 100 slides lang pwede. So maghimo na po kuglain para sa katong additional, sumurag ma 2 slides siya. Kung sa Quipper, try lang na ako upload, pero pwede man ako ihatag through your precedents. Naman may group. Pre-test tomorrow will be from 8 to 12. The same kanina, 8 to 12. No? So, para to give you time na ano. Tapos, gitanaw na ako ang uban before the beginning of the class. Wala dyan sila nag-ukab sa notes na akong gipadala. Mabalaan man na mo sa muang ano, sa muang interface. Wala. So meaning katong wala dito, wala dyan nag-ukab. Okay? So giunsa kanila pag-answer no? Sa pre-test, noon lagi ukab. Okay. Sige,
Ma'am.
do you have any? Yes?
Nangayo raman mi sa among friend og copy mo.
Ano man daw? Downloadable man akong gihatag.
Na may
Dalo-
muhatag, ma'am. So,
Usay sabot mangayo.
yung mga
Francis,
hatag og copy, mga hatag og copy man ba?
copy sa
messenger.
notes?
Opo. Eh, sila na may nag-download.
Okay. Sige. Naro gyud na sa inyo ha, basta iukab lang gud ninyo kay ma-record man gud na siya. No,
Yes, ma'am.
ma-record. Okay. Sige, napay pangutana. Ano na may daghang chat na noon. Sa president lang, o sige, maghatag ko. Pag human na, kaya di mo maminaw, di o ako ihatag daan. You should take your notes because it is the things that you write that you remember the most. Sige, no other questions? So we will end na so that you will have mga siguro basig alas 6 na nako siya ma-upload ang quiz kaya himuon pa nako. So you have time to rest and then answer the quiz. And rest again for tomorrow's pre-test. Okay? So no questions? Yung walang kuryente bukas, i-record naman ito, then I will stop recording na lang muna.